original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Vance-Walz, face-to-face in the only vice presidential debate, hosted by CBS News, moderated by Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, with extensive pre- and post-debate analysis. Stream Tuesday. Special coverage begins at 4 on CBS News 24/7.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Reiser. Welcome to a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides. It's 4 p.m. on the East Coast, and we are just hours away from the only planned vice presidential debate of the 2024 election. I'll be here all evening long alongside my CBS News colleagues in the spin room, political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. We'll be checking in with them throughout the night. The political world has descended on the CBS Broadcast Center here in the heart of New York City. Outside, media from around the world have gathered to hear from the two men who are vying to be the next vice president of the United States. The stage is set. CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell and Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan will moderate the debate. Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz will debate the issues over 90 minutes. Walz and Vance have vastly different views on how the country should move forward, from the economy to immigration to foreign policy. On January 20th, one of these two men will be a heartbeat away from the presidency. Vance has served in the Senate for less than 2 years. Prior to his victory in 2022, he was largely known for his best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy. Vance's selection to the ticket was widely celebrated among Trump's base. Trump chose him as his running mate despite Vance's history of making several disparaging remarks about Trump himself. Once President Biden passed the torch to his number two, Vice President Kamala Harris only had a short period of time to select a running mate. Harris chose Walz over several high-profile Democratic lawmakers, including Governors Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania and Andy Beshear in Kentucky. The decision has united the party, drawing praise from both progressives and moderates. We will dive deeper into our debate coverage in a moment, but I do want to we will actually go to the developments right now overseas in Israel in a moment. Right now, I want to bring in CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa, who is at our studio in Times Square. Bob, good to see you. How is former President Donald Trump watching tonight?
Great to be with you. What a night for CBS News. Margaret and Norah moderating this important moment. And based on my conversations this afternoon with allies and advisors to former President Donald Trump, he will be watching this closely. He has a lot of confidence in Senator Vance to articulate the campaign's positions. He sees the young senator from Ohio as someone who can be an attack dog, who can go after the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, and really cast the United States under the Biden-Harris administration as a bleak place when it comes to border security, economic pain, and especially now national security and foreign policy. Debates are not isolated moments. They don't happen in a vacuum. They happen within the context of the time in which they're taking place. And this debate tonight taking place as there is so much unrest in Israel, as Iran appears to be escalating its tensions and attacks on Israel in the wake of Israel's incursion into Lebanon. So you're seeing foreign policy become an important issue where Governor Walz is someone who has served in the House of Representatives, has served his country in uniform, but will be asked to articulate and lay out his positions on foreign policy and national security on behalf of the Harris ticket.
And Trump is holding his own rally tonight. You have followed the former president for some time. What's the thinking behind that?
Former President Trump wants to be out there on the campaign trail. This is a close race. CBS News polling shows that in the battlegrounds, it's neck and neck all the way between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. And former President Trump, in the wake of his assassination attempts, wants to project confidence to his voters, to undecided voters, to make sure that he's out there on the campaign trail, building that momentum. Because in this final stretch of a presidential campaign, it's about generating news, generating traction. So many voters in the wake of the summer are just starting to pay attention. And I'm told Trump wants to make sure he's there, not always necessarily in a rally type format in an arena, but he wants to be there in these key states, making an argument on the economy and the border, and now on what's going on with Israel and Iran and the broader situation in the Middle East. They always call these things October surprises in American politics. When things take a turn, when things happen you don't expect, think about Access Hollywood tape being released and leaked in 2016, change the race. Perhaps foreign policy change in the race, and you can be sure the candidates will be asked about that issue tonight.
Interesting point there. Bob, CBS News polling shows Democratic enthusiasm for their VP pick is 16 points higher than Republican enthusiasm for J.D. Vance. Why is that?
When you look at the polling, you see Democrats wanting to make sure they can make an inroads in the industrial heartland, places like the upper Midwest and Minnesota, but especially Michigan, Pennsylvania. These are states Democrats really want to do well in. They also see working voters in the South and Georgia and North Carolina as political targets. And because of Tim Walz and his everyday folksy style that he has on the campaign trail, they believe, coupled with the economic policies put forward by Vice President Harris, that this ticket can have appeal on a personality level and on a policy level. So he's popular. Senator Vance is not a traditional Republican. That's where Trump went in 2016 when he picked then Governor Mike Pence of Indiana to try to unite the Republican Party around his new version of populist conservative policy that has now taken over the Republican Party. In Senator Vance, Trump has someone who amplifies and echoes his message. Not everyone in the GOP may love that, but it's a sign that Trumpism as an ideology is front and center in the GOP, and Trump's not trying in any way to feel like he needs to consolidate the party. The party, in his view, is behind him, so he can pick someone who's like-minded.
Robert Costa, we always appreciate your expertise and analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to the situation unfolding in the Middle East. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer joins us now from Tel Aviv. Elizabeth, what's the latest? Elizabeth, what's the latest? Q.
We are now in the post-missile period. We were given the all-clear. Israel has opened its airspace again. People are out of the shelters. The city is very quiet, but there doesn't seem to be any danger of more missiles from Iran. When it began about 3 hours ago, we had about an hour's warning that something was coming. Then it became clear it was going to be missiles from the east, from Iran. And the first we saw was in the sky behind me, the interceptor from Israel. The interceptors going up and blowing up these Iranian ballistic missiles in flight, and you can see the flaming shrapnel sink to the ground. The IDF says that there doesn't seem to have been any casualties. There were some strikes, so some of the ballistic missiles did get through the Israeli interceptors. It appears that a school north of Tel Aviv was hit, but nobody was in it, and we don't know whether that was shrapnel or an actual missile hit. In Iran, there was a lot of jubilation. The official state media was saying that 80% of the missiles had hit their targets and had left devastation across Israel. That is categorically not true. We'll know by morning light tomorrow how much damage may have been done by shrapnel. But at the moment, it looks as if the interceptor missiles, that protective shield that Israel has been remarkably affected. A footnote, the United States did help Israel shoot down some of those interceptors from some of the incoming missiles from outside Israel.
Elizabeth Palmer, thank you. We are continuing to follow developments out of the Middle East as Iran launches those hundreds of missiles at Israel. Ahead, we will hear from a retired U.S. general about a potential response. But next, what can we expect to hear from Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance tonight? We'll head to the spin room after this. You're streaming America Decides.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of we the people. We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides. Let's go ahead and head to the spin room with our Kaylin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe for more on tonight's debate. Guys, I'm so excited to be anchoring these 4 hours with you. Ed, set the scene for us, the state of the race and your expectations for tonight.
Well, Lindsay, welcome to Down the Hall here at the CBS Broadcast Center. You're over on the news side. We're over here where they make the funny and they make the sports usually. But tonight it's the scene of the next big step in this presidential campaign, as our colleagues Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan will moderate this debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And essentially, historically, the vice presidential debate is designed to do no harm, to perhaps reinforce what it is the running mate would do to back up the top of the ticket, and ideally not screw up in any big way to cause greater concern about that person at the top of the ticket. And in this case, we know both of these gentlemen were picked at different times in this campaign to essentially do the same thing: appeal to Midwestern voters, maybe men who were on the fence about either of these candidates, and to reinforce aspects of the politics and the personality of these two contenders. If it was J.D. Vance, it was the idea that he was a next-generation MAGA Republican. If it's Tim Walz, it's that he reinforces the sense of joy and optimism and maybe, yeah, slightly center-left Democratic politics that Kamala Harris has brought to the race. And we'll see how it goes in just a few hours as they spar for about 90 minutes.
Kaylin, what do we know about how each candidate has been preparing for this moment?
Well, it's interesting because if you look at these two tickets, they could not be more different. But
as you mentioned, Vance and Walz are competing for similar types of voters, but they also have very different styles. And we know that they have been studying each other. They haven't been in kind of the big national stage for a long time. Obviously, Walz is a governor, was a congressman. J.D. Vance has just been a senator for about 2 years. But talking to sources in the Vance campaign, they believe that he has had a lot of practice in debates because he's been talking to the press nearly every day in press conferences, going on the Sunday shows, and has kind of conditioned himself to be used to a lot of the oppo coming at him and being able to handle that and answer that. But they've also been setting some expectations for their opponent. They have been saying that Vance has been studying Walz's past debate performances, and they are arguing that he is actually quite a good debater. So some expectation setting there. And it's notable, Lindsay, because Vance and Trump have very different preparation styles. Former President Trump kind of likes to pride himself on the idea that he doesn't need debate prep, that he doesn't do a lot of it. But I can tell you that Vance has been very focused on debate prep. He has had multiple sessions with advisors. He has had a mock debate in which Tom Emmer, the congressman from Minnesota, has stood in for Walz, and we'll talk to him later on in the next few hours as we cover this. And Walz has also been focused on debate prep. He's been in Michigan, a key battleground state, making some stops in between to kind of just meet and greet and shake hands. And, you know, that's kind of where he kind of fuels his campaign, is that kind of retail politics. And, you know, most people in the public just haven't seen Walz in this type of setting. They've seen him a little bit on the campaign trail. They've seen a few interviews, but not necessarily in this type of setting. So he's been hunkering down as well, preparing for this debate. And really, to your point about doing no harm, these two candidates are kind of the proxy for their tops of the tickets, their respective tops of the tickets, because this could be likely the last time we see a debate at all this cycle.
Yeah, and one other thing, Lindsay, you know, while J.D. Vance has been practicing with Tom Emmer, we know that the Harris-Walz team picked Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg to be Tim Walz's sparring partner, not only because he's also from the Midwest, but specifically because they said there's a Democrat who's very good at talking to Republicans in their space, in conservative media. The thought, the hope, the expectation is that Walz is also someone who can do that, given that he once represented a pretty conservative or swing congressional district in southern Minnesota, comes from Nebraska, has been governor of a big heartland state. The hope is that Buttigieg would help him sort of fine-tune that message and think through, how is it that I get through not only to my own partisans, but also to those swing voters or potentially disaffected Republicans looking for a reason to vote for Harris.
Yeah, we see him pop up on Fox News every now and then. Ed
Exactly.
and Caitlin, do debates matter? Talk to us about the undecideds and the disaffecteds.
The question of the campaign. Well, Lindsay, you know, what's interesting here is that when we talk about those undecideds, it is such a small group. This is a base versus base election.
Yeah.
The campaigns will say that. And there are those voters in the middle that are either undecided or deciding whether to turn out at all. And so one of the big tasks for a vice presidential candidate is to be that attack dog against the other, try to tear the other person down, and also kind of make the case against the other. But I think there's a different kind of spotlight this time around because of the idea that could this person fill the shoes of the top of the ticket? I mean, Kamala Harris now is on the top of the ticket. 2 months ago, she wasn't.
Right.
J.D. Vance, he is running with someone who is the oldest candidate in this race, Donald Trump, and would be the oldest president if he would be older than Biden if he were
Vance would be
reelected.
the youngest vice president.
Exactly. So that takes on a new kind of focus.
Anytime someone asks you the question, Lindsay, do debates matter? You have a two-word answer. Joe Biden. Ask him if debates matter.
And the mic drop. Ed O'Keefe, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you both very much. Let's bring in CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. So we're talking about do no harm. 61% looking to see if the other side makes a mistake.
I know. I pulled this up when you all were talking about that. And this is what happened when we asked people who said they were going to watch tonight, which is most voters, by the way. Why are you watching? And yeah, you got this majority, 6 in 10. Say if the other side makes a mistake. Look, the bigger story there, and it's somewhat part and parcel with this 71% who said to root for your party's candidate. A lot of times people have already made up their minds, but they're looking for confirmation, for affirmation of that choice. And there's a lot of that in here, right? They're looking for motivation, stay with the theme, because turnout is going to be so important, like Caitlin and Ed were just saying. But I would also point out this one, to learn something about the candidates. And that's key because, see this number down here, 24% to help you decide your vote? That's a smaller number, but this is so close that if it does move the needle a little bit, that's where it's going to come from. That's not insignificant.
You're taking new polling data here. What else stood out to you in some of the questions y'all were asking?
Well, you guys were talking about it earlier about whether people see these candidates as qualified to step in if needed. And that's probably the basic consideration here. Right now, each of these candidates is under half that the public says they would be qualified. I'm going to watch that tonight, and we're going to do an instant poll after the debate, and we're going to see along these lines if they've moved the needle on this, on likability, on all these other factors, because that is someplace where maybe they both have room to grow.
Vance and Walz haven't been on their respective tickets for very long. Have they moved the needle at all?
Some of that, I think, comes down to the enthusiasm factor. You mentioned this earlier. One of the basic measures maybe is, do you think you make the ticket better? And here, Democrats are really enthusiastic about Walz, and they see 3/4 of them do think he makes the ticket better. But look, you get a majority that say Vance makes the Republican ticket better. Inside this, it's interesting. That's especially true among MAGA Republicans, those who consider themselves part of the MAGA movement, which comes back around to this idea that if it's a base election and if it's about motivating turnout, maybe that's another sort of check the box for those voters that the Trump campaign is going to need.
Anthony Salvento, always good to see you. We'll be seeing a lot of you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell.
Tim Walz dominated social media after that viral clip calling Republicans, quote, weird. But beyond that catchphrase, who is Kamala Harris's VP pick? We'll try to answer that question. Plus, away from
on our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the vice presidential debate. Tonight's matchup will happen amid a crisis in the Middle East as Iran launches missiles at Israel. The White House says Iran launched nearly 200 missiles. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. The move comes after Israel began limited, localized, and targeted ground raids against the Iran-backed group Hezbollah in Lebanon on Monday. Iran last fired missiles at the country in April. President Biden addressed the situation just moments ago.
At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
Retired General Joseph Votel joins us now. He's a former commander for U.S. Central Command. General, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.
What is your reaction to these developments?
Well, I think it's been another extraordinary day in weeks and months of extraordinary time here in the Middle East. I think I'm very, very proud of the fact that looks like the United States and Israel did a phenomenal job here of protecting Israel against this very large and potentially very lethal attack from Iran. So I'm glad that it's turned out the way it is. I don't think we're at the end of it here, and we'll see what comes next year with the Israeli response.
You said we're not at the end of it. How concerned are you about this strike leading to more cycles of retaliation between Iran and Israel?
Well, again, we'll have to wait and see with this. I suspect that Israel's response will be a bit more stronger this time than it was last spring when we last witnessed this. And there's a lot of targets that they can go after. They can go after military command and control. They can go after facilities associated with the nuclear weapons program. And of course, there's economic, targets that are linked to their oil and gas revenues that they could be vulnerable. I think Israel will be trying to send a very strong message to Iran to stop. No more, because this will be met, I think, with a very strong response.
We know the U.S. has moved more assets to the region. We also know the U.S. intercepted some of the incoming missiles to help defend Israel. How does the U.S. balance its response without inflaming things further?
Well, I think one is by being clear about our purposes there, and I think we have been very, very clear that we are there principally to protect and defend Israel. And once again, we've done that in this case with a couple of our ships operating in the Mediterranean there that were in a position to help shoot down some of these missiles. So I think that's first and foremost, is to be very, very clear on this. I think the other thing is by maintaining a strong posture in the region, we are not only reassuring Israel, we're having a deterrent effect, and I think there's pretty good evidence that we have had a deterrent effect on things in the region, and I think it's reassuring to a lot of partners. Things could get out of control. The presence of the United States in the region, I think, is an important leveling aspect to trying to keep things from spinning out of control.
So we mentioned the Israeli military, which had launched a limited, localized ground operation against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. What are their reasons, and is that the right strategy in this moment?
Well, I think what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing is clearly over the last 3 weeks they've had significant impact on Hezbollah, and as we've seen, they've gone after a lot of their leaders. They've taken out Mr. Nasrallah. They've killed the majority of their key military leaders and their first-tier and second-tier leaders. They've done a lot of damage to launcher sites for rockets and missiles. And now what they're doing with these limited ground operations is going in and addressing some of the infrastructure, stockpiles, potentially fighters that are still present south of the Litani River. And they're clearing that out in order to create a situation where they can ultimately allow their tens of thousands of citizens to get back into their homes in northern Israel. I think it is the right approach. I think right now they are trying to take advantage of the disruption and the degradation that they've imposed on Hezbollah, and they're trying to take it down a little bit further, I believe.
Joseph O'Tell, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
We're going to continue to monitor the situation unfolding in the Middle East, but we do want to turn back to tonight's debate. And one of the two vice presidential candidates taking the stage tonight was largely unknown to voters outside of Minnesota before joining the Democratic ticket. Even since then, many Americans might still be wondering, who is Governor Tim Walz? CBS News Minnesota reporter and anchor Esme Murphy is here to answer that question. Esme, good to have you with us. What are the main things we should know about Tim Walz?
Well, I think one thing you should know about Tim Walz is a lot of it is what you see is what you get. He came from very humble origins. He grew up in Nebraska. He was a school teacher for years. He is not a wealthy man by any means. He does not own a house right now. He doesn't even own a car, with the exception of a 1979 International Harvester Scout that was made by International Harvester. It is a car. He is devoted to his family, his two kids, Hope and Gus. Gus, he's going to turn 18 years old here in just a few days. Obviously somebody who has had some learning difficulties that was pointed out during the convention. And he's also devoted, he's a big pet guy. He's been a cat guy for years, for all the attention that cats and dogs have been getting this election. He's had a cat for years, and he's had a dog for the past few years. In fact, he had a cat that went missing last year, and he put it out on social media, and the entire state of Minnesota was looking for his cat, which never did turn up, unfortunately. In terms of popularity, the latest poll has him at 48-47, favorable, unfavorable. He easily won his 2022 re-election.
Walz has come under some scrutiny for both his comments about his military record and his response to protests that erupted in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd. How can we expect him to respond to those issues if asked about them tonight?
Well, I'm sure they probably will come up. On the military record, yes, he did leave the National Guard after serving for 24 years. He was eligible for retirement. He gets very angry when confronted by this, because he says, you know, he put in his 24 years, people who've been in the National Guard, they're kind of the unsung heroes of our military. They do all the supply work. He feels he left at the right time in order to run for Congress. As for the criticism of the riots in 2020, that's something where he is very sensitive and might be vulnerable here. He can be very defensive when asked about that. The riots in Minnesota, George Floyd was killed on a Monday. The riots in Minnesota, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, went on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. Thursday night is when a police precinct burned down. And the response was very, very slow. He is a former member of the National Guard, has been criticized for not bringing in the National Guard sooner.
Based on previous debates, how do you expect him to come out swinging? What do you think his style will be tonight?
Well, you know, he is very personable, so you will see that. He does have a sharp temper. I mean, he can get very prickly, especially in areas where he might be a little defensive. It'll be interesting to see the response to any question about the riots and the riot response. But overall, you'll see a guy who is pretty affable, pretty genial. He likes to keep it in that lane, but when pressed, he can get heated.
Esme Murphy, thank you so much. Fighting for the undecided voters, what we can expect Walz and Vance to say in an effort to win over those who are still on the fence. Our political panel will weigh in on this on the special edition of America Decides.
The middle class has gotten the short end. The wealthy have done very well. Corporate America has been rewarded. It's time we change it. Barack Obama will change it.
Governor. Say it ain't so, Joe. There you go again, pointing backwards.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
This is CBS.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the election's only planned vice presidential debate right here on CBS News. For analysis on tonight, we are joined by Maura Gillespie, Haima Moore, and Kadia Goba. Maura is a Republican strategist who served as an advisor to former Speaker John Boehner and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Haima previously served as director to the Office of Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison, and Kadia is a political reporter with Semaphore. Thank you all for being here. So fun to have you in studio. So, Maura, let's start with you because we just learned more about Walz. How do you expect Vance to hit him on some of those potential weaknesses that Esme pointed out?
He's definitely going to hit on, the military service, and I hate to even start with that because I don't think that the American people, generally speaking, like to see two veterans competing about their service. We can all agree that we appreciate their service, just across the board. But I do think you're going to hear J.D. Vance go after him on that because there's going to be questions about, was it a grammar issue? The response that Tim Walz gave during the sit-down interview with him and Kamala Harris, that wasn't enough, and so we are going to hear more about that. I also think you're going to hear more about this Tiananmen Square comment, and so it'll lead up to this character, essentially, attack, saying, is somebody who we can trust. That's why I think that Vance is going to play on. I'll be curious to see if he really doubles down on some of the other comments that he's made. He has an opportunity here to show the Republican Party that he could be a leader for them. But if he's only playing to one audience, and that audience being Donald Trump, then we're not going to probably hear that. So I'm curious to see which way he plays it. I think at least for the GOP, it's going to be interesting to see how he decides to go with this.
So conversely, Jaime, how do you see Walz trying to point out some of Vance's potential weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Senator Vance say a lot of things over the last few weeks that have gotten some ire from not only Democrats and independents, but Republicans. And so I think the governor's going to bring those topics back up. Childish cat lady. I mean, that's a big deal. That's been a phenomenon that has taken over the internet over the last few months. And then other things that he said about his 15-week abortion ban, things like that, those are going to be things that he's going to have to come and sort of answer for. And so I've been in Minnesota with Vance. I've seen him on the stump. I've seen him out there talking to people. He's very folksy. He's very personable. So I think he'll use some of those tactics to put Vance on the offense.
Kadia, you cover Congress closely. What kind of debate styles do each have?
Well, I think both of them are going to lay out a vision for their, the respective candidates. But when I talk to members on the Hill, they say, Tim Walz has this persona, this folksy persona. Even when I talked to Emmer, he said the same thing, that's the one thing that Vance has to be careful about. But I think it's more relatable to a lot of people, especially to that
Vance
demographic.
Is very adept. Don't count Vance out.
Oh, no, for sure. Yeah. I think both of them respectively are talking to a certain demographic in this country. They were certainly brought on to address that demographic. But when I talk to people in the Senate, they talk about Vance being, this just like sly debater, and that he's very good. And they always bring up this point he had against Tim Ryan, where you kind of put him on the offense or the defense, and Tim Ryan kind of stared at the camera without saying anything. So it should be an interesting match.
Yeah.
Did I say that?
Agree.
Maura, do you see Vance trying to stake his own claim on some issues? I mean, this is, you mentioned, sort of his chance to help lead the Republican Party, or do you see him just sticking to lifting up his number one?
It's interesting because, again, he could sort of carve out his own niche here. He could really tell the Republican Party, yes, Donald Trump is going to win and it's going to be 4 more years, but then beyond that, it's me, because Donald Trump can only serve 4 more years. So he really should take this opportunity to just set a narrative saying that he is a leader and he's ready for this job. But I think given the big switch he's taken, again, he just a matter of years ago was, speaking poorly against Donald Trump, which I think is going to come out in this debate. It's going to be asked about him. He's going to be asked about it.
The DNC is already trolling on projecting on Trump Tower.
Yeah.
And as well, they should ask him about it, right? I think as we, the people, would want to know, okay, so is this real? Should we believe that you've made this a complete 180? And if so, why? What is it about the former president that you are so wholeheartedly for now? So again, I think to my point earlier, it depends on who J.D. Vance is looking to talk to. Is he looking to talk to us, the American people, and us, I'll speak for myself, the Republican Party as a whole, or is he looking solely to talk to one person, and that being the former president?
Jaime, we have lived 1,000 lives since we have had these two at the top of the ticket. Has that benefited Harris and Walz, or is it a hindrance because not as many voters are clued into what they stand for?
No, I think it's been beneficial in some ways. You think about Kamala Harris has been able to introduce herself in a new way to the American people over the last 2 months, which has been fantastic. And even Tim Walz. I mean, he's a fantastic governor, a great person. I know him personally, but a lot of people don't know him. And so I think this debate is going to give him a chance to say, this is who Tim Walz, this is who Gwen Walz, this is who the Walz family is, and this is how this complements Kamala Harris and her plan to not go back, as they like to say. And so I think it's been largely beneficial for the two of them to have pretty much a blank slate. I do think that there are still some questions that need to be answered on policy and some specifics, and so I think that's going to be a thing that he's going to have to contend with tonight.
Kadia, I think Vance will be talking to millions of Americans, but also perhaps the most important audience member is Trump. Trump, of course, will be watching, doing his own Truth Social posts throughout the debate. He's also holding campaign events today. Is that unusual?
No, I think, each candidate has to be, or each branch of the campaign has to be out there working. He's obviously going to watch the debate tonight. But I would pay money to see Vance say something or put himself in front of the former president as if to suggest that he is the future of anything. That would be very surprising for me.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it could also lead to potentially, if he does, then we might see another presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I think that what tonight could show us, if Donald Trump gets, I don't want to use the word triggered, but if he feels as though he's maybe being threatened a little bit by his running mate, he may see this as an opportunity. I have to have the last word.
I agree.
Well, we will see. You heard it here first, folks. I'm Maura Gillespie and Kadia Goba. So good to have all of you. Thank you so much for the conversation. Let's head back to the spin room with Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe for more on tonight's debate. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Good to see you. Caitlin, how much did Vance prepare for tonight?
Well, quite a lot. And in contrast to former President Donald Trump, he was very focused on this debate. They had a mock debate session with Tom Emmer playing Tim Walz. They had various kind of murder board sessions, as they call it. And this is a big contrast to how former President Donald Trump prepares. But what's really interesting, Lindsay, here is that the Vance team really wants to kind of take down Walz on his image. They believe that he hasn't been challenged the way that Vance has in interviews and on kind of the public stage. And so they kind of want to cut into that. And it's notable, too, because when you look at our polling, you see more excitement among Democrats for Walz than you see among Republicans for Vance. And the likability factor, too, there is that gap as well. So, you know, I have to wonder, and I'm curious kind of what you think of this, is how much the Vance team can use tonight to try to improve those numbers, or is it all about taking down the other side? And I think that's something to watch tonight.
And if they're reading our polling, they would stay focused on the issues. They would especially discuss the economy and immigration and reproductive rights and access to abortion services. What we keep hearing is that it may indeed get personal, that it may become a chance to pick apart each other's records, both professional and personal. And if that's the case, our polling suggests very few Americans tuning in tonight want that. They want to learn more about who these guys are. They want some better sense of what they would do to back up the top of the ticket. In the case of Vance, perhaps picking apart Tim Walz, remember what they were doing this time last year, earlier this year, right? Raising concerns about Joe Biden's age and about Kamala Harris's skill and whether or not she was ready to take on the job. Well, now you might be trying to do the inverse. If you're still concerned about her ability to do the job, maybe you have to pick apart the running mate as well and stoke even more concern or more, of the unknown about them and keep those independent voters potentially from switching to his side. They've both been here to check out the facility. They do what we call the walkthrough. They will be back here in a few hours for the rest of their, for the actual debate. And, those of us in the political press corps, both here at CBS and the other places, await them down here, down the hall from where you are, Lindsay, at the other end of this massive building.
Real quick, guys, if it does devolve into personal attacks, which, as you mentioned, CBS News polling says only 14% of people want to hear stuff like that, what will you both be watching for to see who is getting under the other's skin?
Well, it will be interesting to see Walz in this kind of setting because we just haven't seen him on this kind of stage before. J.D. Vance has been on the Sunday shows recently. He does press conferences nearly every day on the campaign trail, and that's by design. What attracted Trump to J.D. Vance was his ability to stand on the stage, defend Trump and everything associated with the Trump brand to the hilt, essentially. And that was a big calling card for J.D. Vance because he had a proven ability to do that and has been doing that kind of on the national stage. So it will be interesting to see kind of how Walz plays that as well. He has brought, another interesting thing in our polling is that Democrats feel like Walz is more of an asset to the ticket than Republicans think about Vance. And that kind of speaks to this bigger picture, which is on the Republican side, Trump is the feature, right? He is the feature for Republicans. And on the Democratic side, it has been more of a unity kind of ticket.
Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe. See you guys soon. Thanks. Fact-checking the candidates, our Confirmed team is gearing up to take a deep dive into what Tim Walz and J.D. Vance have to say tonight. You're streaming America Decides.
I think if you asked most people in America today that famous question that Ronald Reagan asked, are you better off today than you were 8 years ago, most people would say yes. And I'm pleased to see, Dick, from the newspapers that you're better off than you were 8 years ago, too.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback. Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to a special edition of America Decides. We will have live fact-checking online throughout the debate from our CBS News Confirm team. CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett will be part of that. He joins me now. Major, what is the CBS News Confirm team doing tonight?
So think about this during the debate as it's happening. Starting about 9:30 Eastern, if you're watching CBS, and that's a really important distinction, if you're watching CBS, you will see a QR code on your screen. Go to the QR code. And when the debate starts, you will have access to a live blog of fact-checking as the statements on the debate are made, as they're evaluated by our CBS Confirmed team, which is about 10 journalists who will be in real time assessing the truthfulness of assertions in the debate, rating them false, true, maybe misleading, or needs more context. All of that will happen on your sort of second screen as you're watching the debate. That process will be free-flowing and continuous all 90 minutes of the debate. And then when the debate is over, as part of our special post-debate coverage, I will take some of those fact checks and bring them to the television audience. But if you want this process to play out right before your eyes as the debate is happening, put on that QR code, which you can get only on CBS starting about 9:30 Eastern, and you'll be able to watch and observe and have for yourself an actual running tally of statements or things that need more context or more explanation exchanged on the debate stage this evening.
Major, you've covered a lot of debates. What are you watching for tonight?
So this is really important in ways previous vice presidential debates have been, and not just because it's on CBS. Look, we are not certain if there's going to be another presidential debate. So tonight, might be the last national look-in moment of this campaign. The last chance for people who want to assess the tickets may have to have those tickets hash things out, debate in front of each other, prosecute their cases, defend their previous positions on a national audience and a national stage. And the stakes for J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz are very high. For Governor Walz, it's to maintain and enhance the momentum generated by the leader of the ticket, Vice President Harris. For J.D. Vance, it's more complicated. He has to please the running mate who chose him, former President Trump. He has to define himself as more likable than he's presented himself so far. Plus, he has to make a calculation about his political future. Should President Trump be returned to the White House, or if it's in defeat, what comes next for J.D. Vance? All of those calculations will filter through his performance tonight, which is why J.D. Vance is prepared for this debate much more rigorously than former President Trump did for Kamala Harris.
Does that surprise you, the likability factor for him? I mean, he was chosen because of his ability to be that attack dog, get out there in front of the cameras.
So I think one of the things that has been problematic for Senator Vance is in his time in Republican politics, once he became fully Trumpian, which is not where he started, that contrast will get a lot of attention tonight, I suspect, from Governor Walz. But once he made that transition to full Trump, he spent a lot of his time in the Trump siloed ecosystem of media. And that's a very comfortable place. It's a very reassuring place. It's a kind of place where you don't have to explain yourself. A place where lines like childless cat ladies get you a lot of guffaws and applause and thumbs up. Those things don't work as well in a broader audience, and transitioning to that broader audience has been J.D. Vance's challenge throughout this campaign. It will be again tonight.
Major Garrett, look forward to hearing more of you throughout the night. Thank you so much. We are just over 4 hours away from the first and only planned vice presidential debate. In our next hour, also, our CBS News team will break down preparations for tonight's face-to-face. And we will hear from Republican Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer, who played the role of Walz during Vance's prep sessions. Plus, we continue to track the latest from the Middle East as Iran launches a missile attack on Israel. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity? I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem. I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone. The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate, moderated by Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Tonight at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on CBS.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Reiser. It's 5 p.m. on the East Coast, and welcome to a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides. I'm here in New York alongside my CBS News colleagues in the spin room, political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who sort of did the slow look up there to the camera. We'll be checking in with them throughout the night. Down the hallway here at CBS News Broadcast Center in New York City is the debate stage. This is the place where we will hear from Tim Walz and J.D. Vance in the only planned vice presidential debate. Walz and Vance will meet for the first time tonight. Literally, they're meeting for the first time tonight, and they are expected to debate for 90 minutes. Voters are looking to hear a range of issues from economy to immigration. Our continuing debate coverage is ahead, but we do want to start this hour with breaking news in the Middle East. Iran has launched a missile attack against Israel. Israeli military says there will be consequences for these strikes. The U.S. helped intercept some of the incoming missiles as it worked to defend its ally. The White House says the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. Vice President Harris addressed this situation earlier.
I condemn this attack unequivocally. I'm clear-eyed. Iran is a destabilizing, dangerous force in the Middle East, and today's attack on Israel only further demonstrates that fact.
CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer joins us now from Tel Aviv. Elizabeth, what's the latest on the ground in Israel?
Well, we've just heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the first time since those missiles came in. And he says that he said basically Iran has made a big mistake tonight, and if it's going to pay. We heard earlier from Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, that there would be grave consequences, and the U.S. would work with Israel to make sure that they happen. So the rhetoric here is aggressive, and it is also in Iran, where the Revolutionary Guards have made it clear that if Israel does retaliate, there will be serious escalation. So it's pretty tense.
What do we know about what got us here? Why did Iran carry out this strike?
Well, today, Israel did limited ground incursions into Lebanon. That might have been a catalyst, but the Revolutionary Guard made it clear that this is a retaliation that's been coming for some time. You may recall that back in July, the head of Hamas was killed while he was visiting Iran by a rocket that went into his room inside a Revolutionary Guard compound. So deadly, it killed the head of Hamas, but also very embarrassing for Iran's Revolutionary Guard. And they had threatened to retaliate for that, and we've been waiting to see what that retaliation would be. Add to that the death of the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, last week in Beirut. The Revolutionary Guard have said this is a double retaliation for those 2 murders of allies who were very important to us. So they've tied it to, in a sort of tit for tat to those two incidents. And now Israel is going to have to decide how or if it wants to carry this on and escalate.
Elizabeth Palmer, thank you. All right, now we will continue to follow the latest from the Middle East, but we do want to head to the spin room as we await this VP debate with our Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe. You guys have some company with you at the table.
We do, Lindsay. We're joined now by our political director, Finn Gomez, who not only spends time with us here on CBS News 24/7, but has been one of the organizers, frankly, of this debate, right? Helping put it together in recent weeks.
Many sleepless nights, Ed.
I imagine there have been, and you're on the verge of another big night here. Congratulations. Remind us, first of all, when people tune in later tonight, what is the sort of general format? What should we expect once this thing gets started at 9 p.m. Eastern?
Look, it's 90 minutes, as you know, 2 commercial breaks, 4 minutes apiece. Candidates are not allowed to bring any notes. There's no interactions with their campaign and staff, right? There is a format that we discussed where the questions are 2, 2, and 1, essentially. 2 minutes for a candidate to respond, 2 minutes for the opposing candidate to rebut or have the rebuttal against the first candidate, and then 1 minute each for rebuttals there. Look, this is going to be a debate that's going to be focused on policy, on context, on things that we think matter the most to our audience, to American viewers, to potential American, to voters, right? So I think we're in for a real traditional strong debate.
And Finn, you've been not only covering this race, but you've covered lots of debates over the years.
Right.
How does this one stand out to you? Because we've been talking all day about how much debates matter. And Ed brought up a really good point, which is, well, in June, it really was very consequential, forced Joe Biden out of the race. But for a vice presidential debate, for this kind of stage in the game where lots of states are already voting, I mean, that's significant. 20 states already voting.
20,
Is the intention from the campaigns to change the trajectory of this race, or is it to kind of get the message across? Kind of where do you sense things?
Well, there's a couple things, and I think the three of us combined have maybe covered we've covered a lot of debates, right? And I think that for this one though, I mean, just to get an assessment between the three of us, do you remember another VP debate that had this much interest? To me, I was thinking about this earlier. I'd have to go back to 2008, my first cycle that I covered, where it was Sarah Palin and Joe Biden. I think to that level. And the other thing to remember about this one is that this could be not only is it the last, the first and only of this cycle of vice presidential debates, but it could be the last debate period. Before the November 5th.
That's not normally how it goes.
It does. It is not. You don't end with the VP debate.
Right.
Real quick, I've seen some chatter about this and been asked by friends and people we've met along the way. We're here at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York.
Yes.
This is a studio that is normally used by Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, because this is a massive studio space in New York, one of the few that houses television programs in central and midtown Manhattan. Why is the debate being held in New York? Was that something the campaigns wanted? Is that something the networks have pushed for? And give us some sense of sort of what it took to put this production together over the last several weeks.
Look, you've seen it throughout the cycle. There's been some back and forth about where debates will be held, mostly in either in battleground states, right, or key primary states, right, like New Hampshire, Iowa, whatever. I think this site and this location in itself is of value for various reasons. I think some of the ones you just discussed. It's historic. It is our space. This is unlike many other debate setups. The studio's right next door, right? So everything is right here. Like the spin rooms, I think the last debate, the spin room was like 6 blocks away. Right. The spin room is the studio is right next door. So to have that sort of immediacy and significance of the moment, this historic moment, right here at CBS in our story broadcast center, I can think of no other better place. Right?
I mean, good thing we have all the soundproofing in these studios, right? So we're not interfering, interfering there. But what's fascinating to me about this is that point, is that this could be the VP candidates having the last word, and I'm wondering if Donald Trump wants to have his VP candidate have the last word?
Well, we do know that he is planning on having a press conference a little later on today, right? Which is unusual for the person on top of the ticket to have to try to step on the VP's, the running mate's day, if you will. Look, I think to your earlier question, I think there are a couple of reasons why these debates matter, especially. I think one is you're trying to amplify and motivate your base, right? But a lot of this, the dial doesn't move that much when it comes to VP debates, right? But it reinforces what your supporters at home believe in. It's something to encourage, something to be motivated by, right? If you look at also our latest data, if you look at the data that from our great team here at CBS News, led by Anthony Salvanto, it shows that we haven't talked a lot about undecideds this cycle. There are some undecideds. It's more about persuadable voters, right? And right now, it's less than 10%, somewhere around between 5 and 10%. That amount, right? And some of those are like either moderate Republicans or whatever else, but that is enough. We talked a lot, Ed, in CHP about like the battle of margins in those 7 battleground states. Like that can make the difference. So even a little bit counts.
And so they will be tuning in tonight at some point, and could potentially be swayed in those 7 states
potentially,
across the country. Yeah.
Right.
Finn Gomez, our political director, who's been hard at work putting tonight together along with the great CBS News team. Thanks to you. We'll talk later. Good luck. Lindsay, back over to you.
Appreciate it, guys. Let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. So, Nancy, what are Walz and Vance's winning strategies for tonight?
Well, the Vance team, interestingly, has been a lot more forthcoming. The Trump campaign has kind of laid out what he wants to do tonight. They say he wants to go after Tim Walz on immigration, and they say he wants to go after him on his 24-year military record. They just kind of put it out there. So I think we know, what to expect from him, at least when it comes to those issues. The Walz team has been a lot quieter. They're kind of a little more walled off. And so, we know what he's like as a debater because he has been debating for 20 years as governor, before that 6 terms in Congress. But as far as what he wants to achieve tonight specifically, they really haven't said.
So in terms, you cover Walz very closely, in terms of how much of the Midwestern folksy guy are we going to see, or how much of an attack dog are we going to see, and what has some of his prep been like?
I think you're going to see a lot of folksy Tim Walz. First of all, because the campaign knows that is what has endeared him to Democrats in particular, according to our polling. There are a lot more Democrats who are excited about their pick than Republicans who are excited about theirs. So I don't think you're going to see some major departure from the persona that we've seen publicly. I think you'll hear a lot about the Midwest, A, because he's from there, but B, because you've got a pair of very important battleground states in the Midwest, Michigan and Wisconsin. In fact, he has been doing his debate prep in Michigan with a Michigander, Pete Buttigieg, who is the transportation secretary, who's from Indiana originally, but has now moved with his family to Michigan. He's there a lot of weekends. He's been playing the role of J.D. Vance in these one-on-one mock debates with Tim Walz, trying to get under his skin, trying to rattle him, and trying to train him to stay on message and not get too worked up. And not get knocked off course if Vance says things about him that he doesn't like or that he doesn't think are true.
Fascinating. Appreciate your reporting. I love getting into the weeds and all that.
You got it.
Cordes, thank you. The Israeli military says it will do whatever it takes to protect its people. The latest from the region as Iran launches a missile attack on Israel. But next, J.D. Vance turned to another Minnesotan to help him prepare for tonight's debate. We'll speak with Congressman Tom Emmer about his role ahead of tonight's matchup. You're streaming America Decides.
Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait.
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Back to a special edition of America Decides from the CBS Broadcast Center in New York. Former President Donald Trump's running mate turned to a Minnesota Republican to help him prepare for tonight's debate.
Congressman Tom Emmer worked with J.D. Vance as a stand-in for Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. And Congressman and House Majority Whip Tom Emmer joins us now. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So, talking to the Vance team, they say that you were very impressive in your impersonations of Governor Walz. Can you kind of take us into that debate prep? How did you kind of get inside Walz's mind, and what kind of oppo did you prepare for to prepare Vance for this debate?
Well, Caitlin, first, thanks for having me. Ed, good to be with you both. I was honored to be asked to play a very small part, but I spent, we, the entire team, my team and myself spent about a month going through every debate Tim Walz has ever done in the last 20 years. My job was to get not only his phraseology, his slogans down, but his mannerisms. We wanted to give J.D. the best facsimile impression of Tim Walz that we could. And we just pointed out that Tim Walz is an excellent debater. There's no question. But he's going to come across as this folksy, kind of outdoorsman, ag-friendly type guy. And really, there's no substance after that, because as we've learned, as people get to know Tim Walz, they do not like him and his policies. So it's going to be up to J.D. to make sure that, and I know J.D. is going to do it very well, but he'll talk about the issues.
Congressman, you and Walz both served in the House of Representatives representing Minnesota at the same time between 2015 and 2019. I think we were just showing a photo of the two of you when you were serving together in the Minnesota delegation. How much work did you two actually do together, if at all, and what sort of interactions did you have with them back then?
Well, it had several interactions. I don't know that we worked on anything directly together. Our delegation, the Minnesota delegation, Republicans, Democrats, tends to work together very well. So I'm sure we did something as part of the delegation. Nothing comes to mind right now, but I've known Tim, not just those 2 or 3 terms that we served together. I think it was 2. But I've known him since he got elected to Congress about 20 years ago. And the relationship was good, but I have to tell you, Ed, he was playing a character. He was playing this folksy, ag-friendly, because he represented an agricultural district, outdoorsman that he tries to carry off now. But as soon as he got elected governor, I mean, he is not well liked. In the last gubernatorial race, we have 87 counties. He only won 13 and barely won with 52% of the vote. In the 72 districts that Tim lost, he got 37% of the vote, Ed, including his old congressional district, which he lost by almost 10 points. So I think what you find out is what you see is not what you get when people learn that he doesn't have anything to offer except supporting the radical views on the economy, the border, and foreign policy that Kamala Harris does. I think the choice will be pretty clear.
Congressman, you mentioned likability, but in our polling, it seems that Senator Vance has some work to do on that measure. His numbers are underwater there. How much of tonight is making Vance appear more likable, especially among those middle voters that this campaign needs to win?
Look, when it comes to the likability factor, Tim Walz, as people get to know him, I've made it clear, they're not going to like him or his policies. When it comes to J.D. Vance, he's all substance. And what you're going to get tonight, he's going to talk about the economy, how it worked under Donald Trump and how it was broken under Harris and Biden. He's going to talk about the border, how it was sealed under Donald Trump and what that meant to the crime wave across this country being under control and how it was opened by the border czar, Kamala Harris, and it's resulted in crime in all of our communities and tens of millions of people coming across that border illegally. And then he's going to talk about how when Donald Trump was in office, there was peace and stability around the globe. And obviously, all of these conflicts and the tensions that are rising around the globe are because of the incompetence and lack of a stated foreign policy by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. So he's going to be touting the Trump's record of success, telling them they broke it, and Trump and Vance are going to fix it again.
Congressman, you've been traveling the country much of the last several weeks campaigning for your fellow Republicans. You were all in Washington for a handful of weeks to essentially kick the spending can down the road into December, but there have been calls from the president this afternoon, from other Republican lawmakers, several from the storm-ravaged states, suggesting that Congress should come back to consider supplemental spending for the states affected by Hurricane Helene. But now even this afternoon, some suggesting supplemental aid to Israel in its ongoing battle against Iran and its proxies. Do you see that happening? Do you see the Speaker calling back the House for a special session before the election?
Yeah, the people that don't that are making those statements, Ed, I'm going to guess they don't realize that in the continuing resolution that we passed, which will keep the government funded until December 20th, there was $20 billion in there for FEMA. It also gives FEMA the ability to use other accounts if need be. And the biggest problem that we have is it's going to take the Office of Management and Budget at least a month to figure out what the total damage is and where it needs to be done. So these people that are jumping ahead and saying, oh, we got to do this right now, you won't even have the information until November, Ed. So if there is a supplemental that needs to be done, it'll be done after the election, I expect.
So that's a hard no from Republican leadership about coming back early.
I'm just telling you about the mechanics. If there was something to come back for, if the Office of Management and Budget could actually tell us these are the numbers and this is what it's going to take, then maybe there's something to consider. But you don't ignore what I told you. We put $20 billion in that CR for FEMA. So the money's there right now. It should carry us well into November. And if there is an issue that has to be addressed, I'm certain that Republicans and Democrats alike during the lame duck will do that.
All right, Congressman Tom Emmer, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see tonight whether your impressions matched up with the real thing. We'll be staying tuned. Thank you so much. Let's throw it back to Lindsay in Studio 57.
Thanks, guys. New CBS News polling reveals how voters are feeling about the candidates for Vice President of the United States ahead of tonight's face-off. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, is here to break it all down for us. So, Anthony, first, do voters feel either Vance or Walz are ready to be president should they be called upon?
You know, that might be the most important question. One of the reasons we asked it, because, look, this is something that the vice president has to do, right? has to meet that threshold to be qualified if, the need were to rise. Look, neither one of them is above 50% on that measure. Now, some of that is partisanship, the other side saying no, just sort of reflexively. But you do want to watch this because after the debate, does this needle move a little bit, I think is going to be a key metric because, it's sort of the first thing you want to ask about a potential VP.
What issues do voters want to hear about tonight?
Well, not surprisingly, the economy is top, right? Economic views. Immigration views is also top, and reproductive health, abortion is also from a majority. I do want to point out this. Only 14% say they want to hear criticisms of each other. Now, they may not get what they want, right? Because we've seen how these debates sometimes go. But the point is, you do see people at least saying that they want to hear something, I guess, positive, something about these substantive policy issues, rather than just critiques back and forth.
Are most voters watching tonight's debate?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Look, we asked people and they said, okay, a bulk of them are going to say they're going to watch all of it live, right? Some of it, at least parts of it. One of the interesting things about this is that this group here, although it skews a little bit older, as voters do tend to do, there are a substantial number of younger people, right? It's a third, but that's still substantial, who say that they plan to watch. And I'm particularly interested in that group, in part because one of the big questions of this campaign is, are they all going to vote? And that could be determinative. So that's one of the things to watch.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you. Thanks. We are learning more about the U.S.'s role in defending Israel from Iran missile strikes. We'll get the latest from the White House. You're streaming America Decides special coverage of the CBS News vice presidential debate.
You keep talking about trickle-down economics and all this stuff about the worst economy since Hoover. It is a bad economy. It's a tough economy. The question isn't it's not who you're going to blame. What are you going to do about it?
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The White House says it is working with the Israeli military and other Israeli officials to assess the impact of Iran's missile attack today. No deaths in Israel have been confirmed yet.
But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Weijia, what else can you tell us about the White House's response to today's attack?
I was a high school senior and a wrestler. And I said, Leah, what's your favorite?
So you know as much as us with regard to the assessment of the damage. As you mentioned, they said they do not believe there are any deaths at this time. And so we know that the president spoke at length about the partnership between the U.S. and Israel to ensure that this attack did not have more power behind it because they were able to intercept so many of those missiles with the formidable Iron Dome defense system of Israel's, along with the U.S. intercepting as well. We know that 2 Navy destroyers that are already in place in the region were able to fire off several interceptors. What we don't know yet is how many missiles or drones were taken down, how many were intercepted. But certainly, as the president said, he believes at this point that this was a failed mission.
Will this change how the U.S. approaches the conflict in the Middle East over the coming days or weeks?
Well, this is no doubt an escalation, Lindsay. And I think the question is, what will Israel do to respond to this? And we know that the U.S. is in very close touch with counterparts there. The president says he wants to talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu at some point about not only the response, but the consequences. But we also have been reporting that the president has tried to reinforce the need for a de-escalation, the need for a ceasefire in Lebanon and in Gaza separately. And so while the U.S. will continue to stress that, it's unclear exactly what Israel will decide to do. But the White House also said today that that decision is solely up to the IDF, even though the U.S. will be consulting with them.
How long until we hear an update from the White House in terms of potential damage or injuries from this attack and what next steps are?
Well, you know, we're talking about a wide area, and so that takes time in order for that to happen. And so it could be in, the coming hours or days, depending on what the U.S. learns from, the ongoing investigation there. But of course, this all happened very quickly, and it's going to take time to determine exactly what the fallout is on the ground there, Lindsay.
Weijia Jiang, thank you so much.
Sure.
Former President Donald Trump is spending the day campaigning in Wisconsin ahead of tonight's vice presidential debate. The Republican nominee made a stop at a manufacturing facility in a suburb of the state's capital, Madison. He's also expected to speak about the economy in Milwaukee, which has the largest number of Democratic voters in the state. For more, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian, who is in Waunakee, Wisconsin, I believe is the pronunciation of that. Nicole, how is the former president responding to this Iranian missile attack against Israel?
And Cynthia was saying that she plays
Yeah, well, we're actually in Milwaukee awaiting the former president at an event that is centered around school choice. You can probably see Congressman Brian Stile right behind me a short time ago. He delivered remarks about the situation overseas, saying that this was an assault that was committed against the Israeli people and that his thoughts and prayers are with them and that the U.S. should stand strong in defending and standing by its ally of Israel. So we expect to hear more potentially from the former president on this topic, but he did weigh in earlier at a rally in Milwaukee, as you mentioned, which is in a different part of the state, but he basically said that the world is spiraling out of control and even suggested that we are on the precipice of World War III, a global catastrophe. He has also said through a series of social media posts that he feels that this may not have happened on his watch, that when he was the president, Iran was in check, to use his words. So that has kind of been his response thus far with respect to the conflict. He may take questions here, so we expect to ask him a bit more about his reaction and what type of response he might take should he win the presidency in 2024. But that being said, certainly it is one of those split-screen moments, if you will, Caitlin. We kind of saw something similar take place yesterday with the former president being in Valdosta, kind of giving his take and trying to respond to Hurricane Helene, of course, now giving his impressions of what is happening abroad with respect to those Iranian strikes against Israel, as we witness the administration responding and the former president responding as well.
Why turn his focus to this area?
Well, this is obviously a significant battleground, as you know, one of several battleground states that we are watching. And we know that the former president, in fact, was just here over the weekend. But certainly what's interesting in particular about this visit is that he is visiting two Democratic strongholds in terms of Dane County, where he was earlier today, and here in Milwaukee, where he'll be here a short time from now. And this is really about potentially trying to slim the margins within the blue wall, if you will. We know this area is very vital for Democrats as well. They want to hold on to Wisconsin, but, you know, if the Trump team can kind of cut into some of those margins, visiting a place like Milwaukee, you know, kind of getting that local coverage, the campaign is certainly hoping that that kind of helps, particularly if they're able to run up the totals in other redder parts of the state. So this is all part of a broader strategy as a whole, and probably not the former president's last visit here to Wisconsin.
Nicole Killian, thank you. Governor Tim Walz has faced some criticism over his response to the riots after the killing of George Floyd. We'll take a closer look next. You're streaming America Decides.
Donald Trump, and this is not directed at this man, except to the extent that he can't defend Donald Trump. Donald Trump has run a campaign that's been about one insult after the next.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
In an original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
And welcome back to a special edition of America Decides. Governor Tim Walz has long faced criticism following the 2020 murder of George Floyd.
Our CBS Confirmed team has mapped out just how long it took him to bring the National Guard into Minnesota during the public outrage. CBS Minnesota reporter Jennifer Merrily explains those findings.
The National Guard called into Minneapolis tonight after protests turned violent.
These were the scenes that gripped America after the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. Floyd was murdered on Monday, May 25th, 2020, and the video of his death was posted online early Tuesday. Hours later, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called the video sickening, and the first day of protests began.
I also strongly support the rights of those to peacefully protest.
Walz addressed the protests in his COVID briefing the next day.
I was saddened to see that some of the protesters were in harm's way last night, and I just want to encourage everyone to be safe, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic.
CBS Minnesota obtained text messages between Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry's staff that showed the police chief asked the mayor to call in the National Guard. Minnesota's Republican-led Senate issued a report months later that shows just 1 minute after those texts were sent, the mayor spoke to Governor Walz on the phone, and Fry said he asked for that support. Later that night, a text from one of the mayor's staffers said he heard the governor was hesitating to call in the Guard. Walz and Fry disagreed over their conversations. The same Senate report said police sent a written request for the Guard up the chain to the state's Commissioner of Public Safety. Meanwhile, on the streets, chaos continued. Walz urged people to go home, calling the situation extremely dangerous. The next morning, the mayor's office sent Walz an official written request for the National Guard. 5 hours later, and almost 24 hours after the initial call from Mayor Fry, Walz signed the executive order. That night, the Guard said it activated more than 500 soldiers to Minneapolis and surrounding areas. Critics, including Republicans in the Minnesota Senate, say Walz didn't act fast enough to stop the destruction in Minneapolis, including protesters who set fire to the 3rd Police Precinct.
If the issue is that the state should have moved faster, that is on me.
Governor Walz also described a more philosophical question he faced. Would putting additional troops on the ground help or hurt the already volatile situation?
We're not going to restore peace on our streets by having a bigger group of National Guard show up.
But as protests continued, more National Guard troops were brought in. And on Saturday, Walz mobilized the full Minnesota National Guard for the first time since World War II. By Sunday, more than 7,000 National Guard members were on duty. As the 2024 presidential campaign enters its final stretch, Walz's actions on this week have become a point of attack from the Trump campaign.
This is a guy who says that he stands for public safety, but actively encouraged the rioters who burned down Minneapolis.
Governor Walz's team told CBS News in part that the governor, quote, took action and deployed the National Guard to keep our city safe. Jennifer Merrily, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Our thanks to Jennifer and the CBS News Confirmed team. So, how much does a vice presidential debate matter?
Well, we'll take a look at the history of the running mate and the role they'll play in getting the top of the ticket into the Oval Office. You're streaming America Decides.
We went to Lebanon to give peace a chance, to stop the bombing of civilians in Beirut. For somebody to suggest, as our two opponents have, that these men died in shame, they better not tell the parents of those young Marines. They gave peace a chance.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the election's only planned vice presidential debate right here on CBS News. Tricia McLaughlin and Joel Payne join us now. Tricia is a former senior advisor for Vivek Ramaswamy's presidential campaign, and Joel is a CBS News political contributor. Good to have both of you with us. Let's talk about some of the major issues in this election cycle. Let's start with the economy. We're going to pull up a graphic showing how each candidate is doing right now. And Joel, we often hear
Kamala Harris try and sympathize with people about what they're feeling in terms of the cost of goods, et cetera, but also trying to differentiate herself and how she'll make things better. Do you expect Walz to also try and toe that line?
Well, I think what you first have to start with is Republicans work from an advantage on the economy. It's just embedded in the electorate. They think that Republicans are more trustworthy on the economy. So the fact that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have actually fought this race to somewhat of a draw, somewhat of a victory, I'd imagine that what Walz is hoping to do is to kind of continue to keep it right in the middle there, kind of fight it out on values issues related to the economy, not just policy, but talking about the value of fighting for the middle class, the value of the things that he and Kamala Harris want to do. That's been an effective message for them out on the stump, and I'd imagine you'll hear more of that tonight.
Tricia, as Joel was saying, this is an issue that typically polls better for Republicans. Let's talk about Trump's economy plan, bringing back manufacturing jobs, giving U.S. companies expanded research and development tax credits. That was just announced, lowering the corporate tax rate, imposing tariffs on imported goods. How do you see Vance trying to connect with the average American about how they will be better under Trump?
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, too, right, that 2017 tax cuts from Trump, that hangs in the balance. Some of those were extended under the Biden-Harris administration, which actually is of note. But I think it's absolutely imperative for J.D. Vance really to go into how are they going to lower costs for American families. You all remember that first debate with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. She was not able to answer, is the economy better than it was 4 years ago? Americans are facing double the inflation that they were 4 years ago, 20% higher prices. So how are we going to actually lower prices for Americans?
But inflation has cooled, Tricia. So is that, and Harris is gaining ground on the economy.
Keep in mind, though, she was that tie-breaking vote in that Inflation Reduction Act, which later Joe Biden admitted was actually about a climate agenda, and it really just poured trillions more dollars into the economy. Americans do not want to hear platitudes. They want to hear policy. And we did, despite a pandemic, we saw a great economy under Donald Trump. You can compare the two records. Kamala Harris, by all intents and purposes, is the incumbent in this race.
I think the biggest thing that has the Trump-Vance team worried is that Kamala Harris is so competitive on the economy, not just nationally, but you look at states. There was a Pennsylvania poll a week ago that showed that essentially it was a statistical tie on the economy. That's troubling for Donald Trump on an issue that he's supposed to have an advantage on.
And we did have some Republican lawmakers who took credit for some of the infrastructure improvements with the Inflation Reduction Act. But let's talk about some of the weaknesses that each candidate is going to have to defend tonight. So, Joel, first to you. Walz, in terms of some comments he's made about his military record. We just saw the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. How do you expect him to defend himself in some of those things that Vance is likely to bring up?
Oh, I think that's not too much, right? I think Tim Walz has demonstrated through his entire career he's been under these types of attacks when he ran for governor from Minnesota, when he ran for Congress, and he's been able to rebut them at those times. I actually think that what Tim Walz, by his kind of plain-spoken, straight-talk approach, I actually think that ups the genuine nature of his message and builds trust with the public. And I think that that's something he'll want to lean into. Look, it's clear to me that tonight, J.D. Vance has more to gain. Tim Walz has more to lose. As Anthony said on the poll that he showed on an earlier segment with you, Tim Walz is the one who is plus in this race. He is someone who is more popular with the public. J.D. Vance has to catch up. And so he's got more room to grow. He's also got more baggage that he carries into this conversation tonight.
Tricia, Vance is very skilled at debating. We have seen how many interviews he's done and how adept he is at defending the ticket's priorities. But we also know you used to work for Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. He has criticized Trump and Vance over this whole Springfield eating pets conspiracy theory that has just sort of taken on a life of its own. How do you expect he will need to pivot away from that?
Yeah, I think we focus on the facts first and foremost. Yes, what happened in Springfield is poor federal policy. That's just what it is. 20,000 people who are being put into a community, about 60,000 people. These social services are not sufficient, right? They don't have the infrastructure for this. That is poor federal planning. But
DeWine has said that a lot of local business owners are happy to have them on their payrolls.
Absolutely. We're not saying that these are not good workers. But in that same Politico piece, he was saying the DMV cannot sustain this. There's actually massive driving issues, partially because of language barriers, but also cultural differences in driving. The laws in Ohio, as far as driving, you don't need to pass a test. I mean, that's just the facts on the ground. I live about an hour and a half from Springfield, so I'm very familiar with this community. I think, though, the number 2 issue for Americans, even those who don't live in border states, is the issue of illegal immigration. Yes. Let's not let the rhetoric get in the way of the issues. These are, by the way, these are legal immigrants, the Haitians in Springfield.
I think the problem is that J.D. Vance is not trusted as a good faith messenger on this. And I think that that is a part of his entire vulnerability as a public messenger. That's why people think that he believes in childless cat ladies and all of the other tropes that have kind of been hung across his neck as a Republican.
I have to counter that because I will say Tim Walz gave driver's license to illegal immigrants. That's very important. I mean, Americans are not for that in any way, shape, or form. There are 10 to 15 million people who came to this country illegally under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's watch. That is a problem. There's just an ICE report that came out last week that said over the past decade or so, 14,000 illegal migrants that came into this country were convicted murderers. 54% of people in America are for deportations. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz need to say, what are they going to do about this massive problem?
Tricia McLaughlin and Joel Payne, thank you both so much for your time. We will see both of you again in our special pre-debate coverage. Let's go back to the spin room with our Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe for more on tonight's debate. Ed, what's on your mind as we near the 3-hour mark?
Lindsay, as you know, the headlines today, some of them were unexpected, right? We're dealing with the aftermath of a big hurricane. We're also dealing now with Israel and Iran fighting each other in the skies over the Middle East as that conflict continues. And it begs the question, how does that potentially scramble the focus of tonight's debate? I think back to 2016, when we hosted a Republican primary debate here on CBS, and that was the day that Antonin Scalia suddenly died. Scrambled the entire opening segment of that debate as the Republican candidates for president had to discuss what they would do about the future of the Supreme Court, an issue that had not been necessarily top of mind. So how tonight does perhaps federal disaster aid or climate change or what to do about Israel and Iran factor into a conversation with 2 vice presidential candidates who aren't from the South, have very little foreign policy experience, but do have military experience, and undoubtedly have opinions on both those issues.
And it's significant, too, Lindsay, because there has been a greater spotlight put on the role of the vice presidency, given what we saw with Kamala Harris now ascending to the top of the ticket here. Donald Trump's age is a big factor. He is the oldest candidate in this race. It puts more of a focus on J.D. Vance as a competent number 2, ready to fill that role if needed, especially in the wake of the political violence that we've seen as well. So I think the role of the vice president has become more pronounced, making this debate all the more important.
Yeah.
All the more reason to stay tuned.
If that's it, I mean, that tease writes itself. Ed and Caitlin, thank you both so much. We are continuing to follow the latest from the Middle East and reaction from Washington as Iran launches a missile attack on Israel. Plus, Senator Elizabeth Warren will be watching the debate from Massachusetts. She'll be joining us in our next hour as we continue our countdown to the only planned vice presidential debate of the 2024 election right here on CBS News 24/7.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
The
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate, moderated by Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Tonight at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on CBS.
This is CBS.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Reiser. Welcome to a special Vice Presidential Debate edition of America Decides. It's 6 p.m. here on the East Coast. We're just 3 hours away from the only planned VP debate of the 2024 election. I'm here in New York alongside my CBS News colleagues in the spin room, political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. I see the spin room is filling up. We will be checking in with them throughout the night. 35 days from Election Day, the focus in the political world tonight is here on the CBS News Broadcast Center, where Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz will each try to convince voters they are ready to take on the role of vice president. CBS News evening anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell and CBS News chief foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan will moderate. The debate will be 90 minutes. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to answer questions, 2 minutes to respond, and 1 minute for rebuttals. Walz's career in politics began in 2006 as a Minnesota congressman. He was elected in a conservative district, but he's taken on more liberal stance on issues like abortion and gun control in recent years as governor. He's largely been unknown to the rest of the nation prior to joining the Democratic ticket. Vance was first elected to office in 2022, less than 2 years before Donald Trump selected him as his running mate. He's known for his book Hillbilly Elegy, and he's been praised as VP pick among the Republican Party, even as he's made some controversial comments about Trump in the past. 60 Minutes has just announced a primetime election special, which will air Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. For more than half a century, 60 Minutes has invited the Democratic and Republican tickets to appear on our broadcast as Americans head to the polls. This year, both the Harris and Trump campaigns agreed to sit down with the program initially. Vice President Harris will speak with correspondent Bill Whitaker. After initially accepting 60 Minutes' request for an interview with Scott Pelley, former President Trump's campaign has decided not to participate. Our original invitation to former President Donald Trump to be interviewed on 60 Minutes stands. The special 60 Minutes airs Monday, October 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern. I want to go back to Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe in the spin room. Caitlin, Trump's pulled out of the 60 Minutes interview. Why?
Well, Lindsay, I think it's really interesting because over the past couple of months, the Trump campaign has been attacking Kamala Harris for not doing as many interviews like this, not doing as many press conferences and not sitting down with mainstream outlets. And this, I think, Ed, is significant then, that the former president has declined after initially accepting. I think that really cuts into that argument that the Trump campaign is trying to make. If Kamala Harris is going to sit down with 60 Minutes, as Lindsay mentioned, a half a century long tradition. And it's notable, too, I was thinking back to last cycle when Donald Trump did sit down with Leslie Stahl in 60 Minutes and walked out of the interview. That was a moment. So the idea of having agreed to the interview and pulling out, I think, raises some questions about why and what advantage that might give to Harris.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the moment back in October 2020 when he walked out on Leslie Stahl at the White House. And again, we should reiterate, 60 Minutes has said the invitation to appear on the program still stands. The interview, if it's agreed to, would be conducted by Scott Pelley this time. But notable that a candidate, a nominee, a former president, who's such a fan of broadcast television, the power of it and the popularity of programs like 60 Minutes, would decline the invitation. We don't officially know why he's declined. We'll have to wait and see if he weighs in on this later tonight or at some point on social media. But notable that he would not agree to that for whatever reason, at least at this moment. We know he's on the campaign trail over the next several days, making stops tonight in Wisconsin, going to Butler, Pennsylvania, right? The scene of the first assassination attempt on Saturday. So there are opportunities to be out there with him should he agree to allow 60 Minutes to do it. And we should point out, Lindsay, our colleagues at 60 Minutes take these interviews incredibly seriously. They spend a lot of time preparing for them, preparing questions for them. We saw, for example, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama do this back in 2012. We had Joe Biden and Donald Trump do it just 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in 2016. Previous to that, the program has often gotten the first interview with a ticket, whether it's Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan or Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine. And why not? It's the largest, most popular news program in the country, one of the top 10 broadcast television programs. We'll wait and see why the former president said no.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe. We'll see you soon. We turn now to the Middle East. Iran fired a barrage of missiles into Israel today, retaliation for the killings of Hezbollah and Hamas leaders. Israeli citizens were ordered to bomb shelters as explosions were heard across the nation. Missiles were intercepted with some help from the United States. Iran later put out a statement saying its mission was, quote, duly carried out. Israel said it has not heard of any casualties. Earlier, President Biden addressed the attack.
Appears to have been defeated and ineffective. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata joins us now from the Pentagon. Charlie, what have we learned about the scale of this attack and the impact on Israel?
Yeah, Lindsay, it's by far the most significant escalation by Iran yet. Just this afternoon, the Pentagon spokesman described it larger in scale and scope than the last massive attack from Iran, at least in terms of those ballistic missiles. I'm sure you've seen these images of the missiles and intercepts streaking across the skies over Tel Aviv. We were told moments ago approximately 200 missiles were fired, all of them from Iran, none from Hezbollah. Some estimates are even higher. The vast majority of them had been intercepted by Israel's own missile defense systems. Our colleagues in Israel say one person was killed, a Palestinian, in the West Bank, actually from shrapnel that came down from a downed Iranian missile. Some of those missiles apparently did land on Israeli ground, causing some damage, but no injuries. We're also told, as you mentioned, 2 U.S. warships were involved in defending against those missiles, 2 destroyers in the Mediterranean Sea, the USS Cole, the USS Bulkley. They fired around a dozen missiles, is how it was described to us. They weren't able to assess at this hour whether they were successful intercepts. But again, the vast majority down by is Israel's own defenses.
Charlie, what U.S. assets are in the region?
Well, Lindsay, the U.S. Military has been expecting and planning for massive retaliation from Iran since August, when Israel killed senior Hamas and Hezbollah leadership. And that was even before the killing of Hamas leader Hassan Nasrallah. So they have been preparing for this. So there's a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group in the region, the USS Abraham Lincoln. I've learned that deployment has now been extended until mid-November. There are a number of destroyers, including those in the Med that took part in today's operations. 4 more destroyers in the Red Sea, several squadrons of warplanes, F-16s, F-18s, F-22s, F-35s, the list goes on and on. So the United States was already forward postured. It's been described as, to me as more than enough assets to deal with whatever contingency may come.
Charlie Daggett at the Pentagon, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's throw it back to Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe in the spin room.
Thanks, Lindsay. We appreciate that. And joining us now is Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Senator Warren, great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here.
What are you, well, if you were Tim Walz tonight, Senator, how would you prosecute the case against J.D. Vance on stage?
Look, I think that he should make the case about who he is versus who Vance is. This is contrast, right? And part of that is their experience, their background. J.D. Vance was a venture capitalist out in tech world, and Tim Walz is a public school teacher and a coach. I think you'd prosecute the case in terms of who has the kind of experience both to be a good partner and who would be ready to take over as president. And again, you go to the experience. J.D. Vance has had 18 months in Congress. Tim Walz had years in Congress and years serving as a governor. And then ultimately, I think it's vision. What do you see as the vision for this country? J.D. Vance totally embraces the Donald Trump. It's fear-mongering. It is a scary, dangerous, horrible world out there. And Tim Walz is with Kamala Harris. It's a world in which we can actually create more opportunity for more of our people and get some fairness back into the system.
Senator, you and Vance serve in the Senate together, and you've actually worked on legislation together. One of those pieces of legislation was trying to claw back money from CEOs of failed banks. I'm curious, what did you see in him that made you want to work with him on that issue? And how was that experience?
So, do understand, you know, I will work with anybody on the other side of the aisle if we can advance legislation that is important to the people of Massachusetts that I serve and to our country. In that particular case, I actually heard him being interviewed on television, and he was saying that he was really angry about the collapse of these 3 big banks last year, and that he thought we ought to prosecute those guys. So I thought, whoa, there's someone I should talk to. And I said, I have this bill, and the idea is to claw back some of the ill-gotten gains that they have. You want to join up? And he said, yeah, that he did. And so we tried to push that forward. And I'm still hopeful that we might be able to get a vote in the Senate on that. So look, there are places where you can intersect. The question, though, for being Vice President of the United States is a good partner to the president and someone who's ready to step up if anything happens to the president and actually take over the duties of the President of the United States. And I believe that Tim Walz has both a better experience base and a deeper understanding of how the pieces of government work and a vision to help us build a nation that isn't just about the top 1/10 of 1%. It isn't just about the venture capitalists and private equity bros, that it really is about creating opportunity for everybody in this country.
In our remaining moments with you, Senator, I wanted to get you on a few other subjects real quick. First of all, you're on the Senate Armed Services Committee. It sounds as if the U.S. military was involved in hitting back at Iran as it attempted to attack Israel today. Are you satisfied the Pentagon's telling lawmakers like yourself everything there is to know about U.S. military engagement? Any sense that more is going to have to be provided? Or should there be more thoughtful congressional debate first before any of that happens?
This is an unfolding story, so I want to make sure that we have our facts straight before I make any comment on the specifics here. But I do want to say Israel has a right to defend itself. The United States helps in that defense. Benjamin Netanyahu does not have a right to drag us into a war in the Middle East. And I think it's really important that we get the bombing has to stop. We need to get those hostages back from Hamas. We need to get humanitarian aid into areas that have been bombed. And we really need to give a hard shove to all of the parties to come to the negotiating table and work out a peace plan for the region. That's how we can best serve the region and serve Israel.
And Senator, just quickly, we've been talking a lot about the top of the ticket, but down ballot races, the race for the U.S. Senate is razor thin. How do you see it? Are you concerned that Republicans are better positioned to win the Senate?
Look, let me start with just how important this is. If Donald Trump should take the White House, which I very much hope he doesn't, if they also have control of the Senate, this will be the next 1, 2, 3 Supreme Court justices, and this will be our entire judiciary. There will be no one to stop them. And with a Supreme Court that has basically said Donald Trump can be a king, there will be no checks on him if the Republicans are in control of the Senate. Also, if Kamala Harris has the White House, if Republicans stay in control of the Senate, that means that she will have trouble nominating judges, trying to get some balance back into the system, and that we can't pass the legislation we need, in particular, making Roe versus Wade law of the land again. So there's an enormous amount at stake here. I like our chances because I like our candidates. On the defense, we're out there defending every seat, and I think we're doing a great job. And I just want to say, I think we've got pickup opportunities in Texas and in Florida. Anybody who's interested in those races, you know, they could use some help. Go online, take a look. Because if the Democrats can pick up Texas or Florida, if we can defend all of the seats we've got, then we can stay in the majority and we can be a good partner to Kamala Harris in getting abortion and access to IVF fully protected, in protecting our voting rights across this country, and in passing rights so that everybody is entitled to join a union. So a lot of good stuff we can do and a lot of danger if the Republicans have the Senate.
Trying to expand the Senate map into Florida and Texas. We're okay with that because those are warm states and we don't mind visiting them this time of year. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, thank you for joining us from Boston. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Much has been said about the small Ohio town of Springfield, but a lot of it has been false.
CBS News' Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us after the break to talk more about Springfield and the truth about the real issues the town is facing. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions. What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The town of Springfield, Ohio, was thrust into the national spotlight after false accusations quickly spread of Haitian immigrants there stealing and eating pets. The claims were repeated by former President Donald Trump and Senator J.D. Vance. And since then, many Haitian residents say they have been concerned for their safety. The issue is likely to come up when Vance and Walz take the debate stage tonight. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us now from Springfield. Camilo, tell us how these rumors got started and why Senator Vance continues to promote these false claims.
Hi, Lindsay. It appears that these false allegations about this small city in Ohio first emerged online in right-wing groups and by right-wing figures. And they were, of course, giving a lot of oxygen by Senator J.D. Vance and other Republican lawmakers. Of course, former President Donald Trump talked about this claim during his presidential debate with Vice President Harris. And it is very important to note that despite not just local authorities disproving and debunking these claims, officials here in Ohio, including Republican politicians, have also said that these allegations are not true, including the governor of the state, Governor DeWine, who is a Republican and who's also supporting J.D. Vance and former President Donald Trump for the presidential ticket in 2024. And despite all that, J.D. Vance has yet to correct the record. He has in many ways doubled down on these claims, saying that constituents of his are calling his office to report some of these claims. But again, there has been no corroboration. And I'm sure we're going to get to this, Lindsay. There are legitimate policy discussions to have about the migration pressures that towns like Springfield are having in the past few years. But of course, these claims are not just misleading, inaccurate, and false, but they can be dangerous because we did see threats against buildings, including schools here in Springfield, in the wake of those allegations.
Can you please fact check for us who these migrants are, how they're able to be there? I mean, I know that we've heard from the governor. He's been talking to local businesses who have said they've brought some of these businesses back after the pandemic.
Well, this is another inaccurate claim that J.D. Vance has made about the Haitian immigrants in this community. He has called them illegal aliens, Lindsay, despite the fact that they entered the U.S. lawfully and are here in the country legally. They have been able to come to the U.S. legally under 2 Biden administration programs. One of them allows people who have American sponsors to fly into the country legally and to work here lawfully, and another allows people in Mexico who are waiting for an appointment to enter the U.S. to be processed legally at an official border crossing and then to work in the country lawfully. And most Haitians here are also eligible for something known as temporary protected status, and that is a legal immigration relief program for nationals of countries that are right now undergoing an emergency, a natural disaster, a war, or some other crisis. And of course, we know that Haiti is still in deep political turmoil, and that is the reason that the Biden administration has created this TPS program for Haiti. So these immigrants here are working lawfully, and they are in the country lawfully.
Camilo Montoya Galvez, appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio will meet for the first time tonight, not just on the debate stage, but just in general in person. The vice presidential candidates will meet on the CBS News debate stage here at the Broadcast Center in New York City in less than 3 hours. Earlier today, both men did walkthroughs of the space with their teams. They did not meet. Walz is hoping to bolster Vice President Kamala Harris's position in the race, locked in a dead heat with former President Trump. Vance will likely launch a barrage of attacks on the Biden administration and Walz's record. And we do know who is going to be in the spin room on behalf of the Trump-Vance team, including Donald Trump Jr., Representative Byron Daniels, Representative Elise Stefanik, Senator Katie Britt, Senator Tom Cotton, and Jason Miller, a senior Trump advisor. For more, let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Mizell. Shauna, you cover the Harris-Walz campaign. Who's going to be in the spin room for them?
Lindsay, it's great to be with you in person finally, but tonight we're going to see Democratic surrogates in the spin room. These are going to be politicians like Jasmine Crockett. You're going to see Amy Klobuchar, Senator Mark Kelly, and you'll also see Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. But you know, the spin room is where these surrogates are going to convene in an attempt to simply spin the narrative based on what we hear from these candidates on that stage tonight.
Pritzker, who at one point was in contention to be on that stage tonight.
Mark Kelly as well.
Yes, you have been obviously talking to the campaign about how they've been preparing. What can we expect? What has Walz been focusing on?
That's right. We actually just landed in New York today, coming from Michigan, where Walz was doing his debate prep with Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg was actually standing in as J.D. Vance, and Walz has really been focusing on staying true to himself. I think that's really conveyed by some of the events we saw him doing over the last few days, right? So he went to the Minnesota versus Michigan football game, and he also stopped by a farm where he shot pumpkins out of a launcher. We know this is someone that's from rural Nebraska, a former football coach, and they even named his debate camp Camp North Star to really underscore and illustrate the fact that Tim Walz is going to try to stay true to himself tonight.
Fascinating, very interesting. Thank you so much, Shauna Mizell, for your reporting. Appreciate it. Still to come, we are continuing to follow developments out of the Middle East as Israel vows to retaliate for a missile attack from Iran. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Israel says it will retaliate after Iran launched a major missile attack today. The attack marked the latest in escalations in the Middle East amid concerns tensions in the region could lead to a larger conflict. Natalie Brand filed this report.
Sirens wailed and explosions could be seen in the skies over Israel as Iran launched a ballistic missile attack against Israel.
Iran launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles towards targets in Israel. At this time, and I stress at this time, we do not know of any deaths in Israel.
Iran's UN mission says it launched the attack because of Israel's attacks on Hezbollah and in retaliation for Israel's ground offensive in Lebanon. A U.S. defense official confirms American forces are helping to intercept some of the Iranian missiles. This comes as the Pentagon has moved additional military support to the Middle East to help Israel defend against further attacks. The U.S. is sending 3 additional aircraft squadrons to the region. An F-15, F-16, and A-10 squadron will be arriving soon. This is on top of the 2,000 to 3,000 more U.S. service members the Pentagon ordered to the region Monday to join the more than 40,000 already there.
An Iranian diplomatic source told CBS News that hardliners within Iran were demanding the strike against Israel. The White House had previously warned that an attack will carry severe consequences for Iran.
This is a significant escalation by Iran. We are now going to look at what the appropriate next steps are to secure, first and foremost, American interests, and then to promote stability to the maximum extent possible.
Israel says it's keeping its ground forces close to the border to try to stop Iranian-backed Hezbollah forces from launching rockets into Israel.
If the state of Lebanon and the world can't push Hezbollah away from our border, we have no choice but to do it ourselves.
Israel has warned Lebanese citizens to evacuate the area, and many are heeding those calls, with Hezbollah escorting civilians out. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
Thank you, Natalie. Turning back to our coverage of the only planned vice presidential debate, Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance are gearing up for tonight's matchup. They're in New York. We are now joined by Maura Gillespie and Haima Moore. Maura is a Republican strategist who served as an advisor to former House Speaker John Boehner. Haima previously served as director to the Office of Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison. He's also a principal at the public affairs firm Cornerstone. So good to have both of you back. Maura, earlier in the show, we were talking about Vance spreading false claims about what is happening in Springfield in terms of migrants killing and eating pets, which is not true. CBS News has debunked that. Do you expect him to double down on that tonight?
Thus far, he has, which I think is a problem just across the board. Again, you're introducing yourself to millions of people who may not know you. Yes, in the political circles, we know who J.D. Vance is, but this is really his opportunity to introduce himself to millions of people. And I don't think that doubling down on such a refuted claim is a strong strategy. I think talking about immigration from a Republican standpoint, you talk about it to be the land of hope and opportunity. We need law and order. That's how you can frame this conversation. But we are a nation of immigrants. My grandfathers both came here.
But immigration is a winning issue for Republicans.
It is, but I think when you're going to win the MAGA vote by doing that. Okay, but what about the votes that you need to get to win this election? You're not going to win them over by doing it that way and by speaking in such disparaging ways and by perpetuating conspiracy theories. Because at the end of the day, you're just telling the people who follow you and listen to you, you're lying to them, and that's a disservice to them.
Haima, what does Walz need to say to represent how a Harris-Walz administration will? I don't want to say fix the border because we know that illegal border crossings have been down. We know that the Biden administration has put severe restrictions on asylum, which appear to be working.
Yeah. I mean, look, this has been an issue for a very long time, decades and tens of many long years. And so I think what Governor Walz is going to say, look, the vice president was just in Arizona earlier this week. So they want to talk about two things. One, this bipartisan bill that they believe Donald Trump asked Congress to kill. And then secondly, they want to talk about humanity. How do we get to order and security, but also have a humane process that allows for immigrants who want to come to this country legally to do so, and those DACA recipients, for them to figure out some way to get to a citizenship as well. And so it's not just Republicans are going to win on immigration. It's about a new way forward. It's about the Democrats talking about humanity.
You mentioned the border bill. I mean, Trump has said it was a bad bill. Wouldn't Vance just say the same thing?
Yeah, but their colleagues did not say that. So they're senators and they're members of the House who were firmly supporting this bill until Donald Trump called. And so I think the vice president, the president, even Donald Trump in some ways believe that this bill was the right way to go forward, but not politically advantageous.
Maura, Vance has also gotten a lot of comments and pushback from the sort of childless cat lady that has entered the zeitgeist. Vance said that is not what he means in disparaging women who don't have children. I expect Walz might bring this up because it has, like I said, entered the zeitgeist, social media. It becomes a meme. How do you expect he will pivot from that?
I would be surprised if we don't hear something about cats tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on my bingo board all over. But I just think that when you're disparaging a group of voters that you need to win over, largely, this isn't how you do it. And I think we've gotten to this point where, Sarah Huckabee Sanders then doubled down and tried to attack Kamala Harris for not having given birth to children. I just think that you're attacking a voter base that you need to win. Both sides do. And J.D. Vance, he's married to a woman who is an accomplished, intelligent woman. Why would you then go and disparage a voting bloc that you need or offending your own wife? I just think that he has to be really smart here and not do that. So if he has an opportunity to clarify his comments, by all means, I hope he takes that chance or takes that opportunity. But I just think that we've gotten to a point where it's just politically moronic to continue to disparage women who don't have children.
And Lindsay, we remember this in 2018. The blowback from the women vote when Donald Trump was making those comments then was catastrophic for the Republican Party. And so I think we may see some of those same women come back to the table and say, look, I don't want to have this conversation anymore. We are here to support things that we care about, but we don't want to be talked down to.
Who has more to gain and who has more to lose from tonight?
That's a good question. I think both have equal amounts to gain and lose. These candidates, as Mara said, we know them because we do this every day. But neither candidate is widely known by the American people, so I think they have to introduce themselves. And if they don't do that correctly, that's going to be something that's going to hurt them. And then secondly, they want to be likable. They want to be seen as someone that you can have a beer with, you can have a conversation with. And so I think both have a very high bar to reach, and I'm not sure how that's going to go for either candidate.
Mass appeal is important, and likability. And for people who aren't going to tune in for the entire thing, I hope they do. But sometimes you're going to see someone who flips in for maybe 10 minutes, and it really does matter how each candidate comes across and how they talk to both to Nora and Margaret, but also how they talk to each other, but how they address the American people. Are you coming from a personal attack standpoint, or are you coming through policies? For J.D. Vance, talking about Harris's housing policy. Talk about how, it's heavy on federal regulations. Okay, great, he's talking policy. Don't attack her for, again, the things the Trump MAGA world has known to do is just go personal. And I just don't think that that's a winning strategy.
No, it's not.
All right, Maura Gillespie and Jaime Moore, thank you both so much for all of your time. We appreciate both of you. We're going to check back in with Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe to find out more about what's happening in the spin room. Who are you guys seeing? What food is being brought in?
Well, we do wish there was food being brought in, Lindsay, but we are keeping warm and here with some coffee that we'll need because we have 2.5 hours to go until this debate really starts. But Ed and I have been kind of cold because, as you know, Lindsay, these studios are very cold. But now we're warming up because the room is warming up a little bit. People are starting to arrive, starting to be here. We have lawmakers in the building, in the room. We're going to speak to one of them later on.
Yeah, because Trump-Vance team has sent Donald Trump Jr., Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who was on CBS Mornings earlier today, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, Jason Miller, senior advisor. All of them will be here to sort of shape perceptions of how it went or how it might go. And one of those surrogates for the Trump campaign, the Alabama Senator Katie Britt, she will be our guest coming up next here as we continue our special coverage of the vice presidential debate here on CBS.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, Caitlin Huey-Burns, see you both soon. We are going to have more coverage of the first and only planned vice presidential debate on CBS. Up next, we will go back to the spin room so that they can speak with Republican Senator Katie Britt of Alabama for her assessment of tonight's face-off and what, in her view, J.D. Vance needs to do to win over voters. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The way I see the debate is very simple. It's an opportunity where for 90 minutes, Governor Walz and I are going to debate the issues that matter to the American people.
And welcome back to our special coverage of tonight's only scheduled vice presidential debate right here on CBS News.
As you just heard, J.D. Vance is hoping tonight's debate won't be one of personal attacks and barbs, but one where the candidates discuss the issues that matter. I suppose we could all hope for that.
Indeed. And joining us now to discuss some of those issues is Republican Senator from Alabama, Katie Britt. Senator, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
So nice to see you. I appreciate you letting me be on.
One of the interesting notes in our polling, too, actually, one is that J.D. Vance faces an uphill climb when it comes to likability. The Republican Party right now is facing a wide gender gap. I know you were tasked with giving the response to the State of the Union. You have been talking about these issues. First, are you concerned about this gender gap for Republicans? And do you think that J.D. Vance tonight needs to make up ground with women?
No, listen, I know J.D. Both as a person and as a colleague. I have loved getting to know him and Usha. When you get to know them as people and parents and get to know their heart and what they're doing this for, I think when the American people get to see that tonight, they're going to fall in love with J.D. Vance and his passion for the nation and what he stands for and who he's fighting for. When you look at supposed gender gaps, obviously you see in some of the recent polling, women on one side, and then you see men more strongly supporting on the Republican ticket. I think when we start to talk about the issues, when we talk about policy and where we are, securing our border, having safer streets, I mean, you look at what's happening abroad. Right now, guys, there is chaos in every corner of the globe. And I think when we talk about those issues, we talk about that, I think those gaps close because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you look back to President Trump's record, he was strong when it came to creating jobs for women. It was the largest number of women in small businesses, the largest number of women in the workforce. He worked diligently to make sure that federal employees had paid leave. I mean, you can look at a number of issues where that matters. Been working diligently on child care issues, amongst a number of other things. You mentioned earlier State of the Union. You know, Stead said before then and continued now, strong supporters of IVF. There has been no stronger supporter of IVF than President Trump. And I think when we get down to the facts and we tell the American people where we are, I think that gap closes. And I think tonight they'll get to know J.D. Vance. And I think he'll also expose the truth about Kamala Harris, the truth that I believe that the media hasn't done up to this point.
You serve with Senator Vance in the Senate.
Yeah.
Both of you are, in essence, in the youth caucus, right?
That's the truth.
Barely in or just in your 40s.
Though. You do know that. Like, yeah. I think the average age of the U.S. Senate, it was told the other day, is like 67 or 68. Obviously, J.D. and I fall on the other end of that. But we're proud. We're representing a new generation of leaders, the next generation stepping up and fighting to preserve the America we know and love for our kids.
What is it about him as a senator that maybe voters haven't seen that gives us some sense of how he would serve in the role as vice president and as head of the Senate?
Yeah, so
one of the jobs they'd have to
there are a number of things. Look, J.D. is unafraid to do hard things. No matter what the task in front of us, he digs in and he gets to the bottom of it. He doesn't accept the common answer. He wants to understand why it's a problem, get to the root of it, and figure out an actual solution. When you look at everything he did, particularly, let's rewind to when we had the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, and then the acquisition of First Republic. J.D. was first out of the gate to say these executives can't keep these bonuses and this additional pay that they got. The American people deserve better. He fights for everyday Americans. So whether it's that or what you saw him do, obviously, with the tragedy that occurred there in Ohio, he's there to make sure that the American dream is available and ready for every person across this country. He wants to change and close the gap between the have and the have-nots. And he's unwilling to to speak truth to power. And you'll see that tonight. He is brilliant, too, and his ability to know the issues and then fight diligently for a solution that puts American people first, I think, is ultimately what our country needs. Because if you look at us right now, we've had 3.5 years of Kamala Harris's leadership. And there is no way that she can answer that question, are you better off? She's refused to answer it 3 times. I think you'll see Tim Walz refuse to answer that tonight because the truth is we're not. Our border is less secure. Our streets are less safe. And look at the chaos across the globe. we need real leaders, and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are the leaders that we need.
Quick policy question on the economy. Donald Trump has proposed tariffs on a lot of things as a way to pay for some of his proposals. Mitch McConnell says he doesn't like that plan of tariffs. Donald Trump has said that he can go around Congress, and he doesn't care what Congress says. He wants to go around them. Are you comfortable with that?
Look, I take my Article 1 responsibilities very seriously, and certainly want to make sure that Congress does a better job of actually doing our job. If you look at what we've done under Chuck Schumer, we haven't even passed any appropriations bills. Not even one has been put on the floor this year. Guys, that's completely and totally ridiculous. The American people deserve better. So, yes, I want to see Congress more engaged. But look, when you look at Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, what they want to do is put American workers back in business. They want America to build again. They want us to increase our manufacturing. They look at what happened during COVID, and they know we must secure up our critical supply chain. I mean, look at what you're seeing right now. You've got Putin's aggression into Russia. You've got Israel and the Middle East actually on fire. And you have Xi Jinping saying, it's not an if, but a when I take Taiwan. So when we look at the fact that we get majority of our critical minerals from China, when we look at the fact that so many of the things, whether it be pharmaceuticals or others, are made in different places, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump know we have to onshore these opportunities to protect the American people. So as they work to build America back up, it's about creating jobs and opportunity for people who live here, and ultimately for a stronger economy and a stronger America.
Senator, we have to go, unfortunately, but we're former congressional reporters. You're a former Senate appropriations staffer. We're going to nerd out about the appropriations process.
I would love to. It's my favorite thing to do, because I am on a mission that we are going to get this place back working. The last thing I will say on that, you know, it has been 30 years since we passed all 12 bills individually and on time.
It's a problem.
That is a problem. Every time we pass the buck, it costs the American people more money. And so it's time for us to do our job, do what everyone sent there, make hard decisions and do hard things. And I'm ready for it. And I know J.D. Vance is, and certainly Donald Trump's done it before, and he's going to do it again.
Speaking of money, we got to go make some. So we appreciate you being here. Alabama Senator Katie Britt, thank you so much.
And coming up, for much of Gen Z, the 2024 election will be the very first one where they can actually vote.
A founding partner of Puck will join us to discuss the role age and gender demographics play in the race for the White House. Stay with us. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen.
She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to a special edition of America Decides. Both the Harris and Trump campaigns are spending millions of dollars on advertisements targeting specific demographics. Recent CBS News polling shows 64% of likely voters under the age of 30 have Vice President Kamala Harris as their choice for president. 36% said they would vote for former President Trump. Peter Hamby joins us now. He is a founding partner at Puck and the host of Snapchat's Good Luck America. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Big night for CBS.
According to Pew Research, President Biden won 59% of voters under 30 in 2020. How does the Harris campaign compare?
Look, they are getting there. When Biden left the race, it was the Democrats were in bad shape. Joe Biden was not winning young voters by the margins that he needed to win the election. The general thinking, at least since Barack Obama's first election in 2008, is that Democrats need to win about 60% of the youth vote, that vote from voters between the ages of 18 and 29. Kamala Harris is getting there, but it depends on the poll that you're looking at. At the Harvard Youth Poll, which is kind of seen as the gold standard these days of looking at how Gen Z is thinking about politics, Kamala Harris is winning likely young voters by 31 points. But if you look at the New York Times Siena poll that just came out a few days ago, she's winning that same demo by 23 points, according to that poll. If you look at the Harvard Youth Poll, Joe Biden is winning young Hispanic voters by about 30 points. If you look at the NBC Telemundo poll that just came out a few days ago, she's only winning by 10 points. So it depends on the data. It's hard to poll this demographic, especially first-time voters who are only just registering. And remember, some of these people who are going to be voting in this election, they were only in middle school or high school when Donald Trump first came down that escalator in 2015. So this is all they've known. This political era that we live in, we take for granted that Donald Trump might be newer on the scene. This generation doesn't. But Kamala Harris is making an effort lately, going on the Up and Smoke podcast to talk basketball, but also about young black men. And then she has influencers going out there on TikTok talking about how Trump's tariffs would raise the prices of alcohol. And then she had Dave Bautista come out the other day because she needs to get that young male vote. So she is working on things, and I think it's showing up in the polls so far, but she does have work to do. The good news for her is she is dominating among young women, and that could make up for any losses among young men.
What can you tell us about the Gen Z voter gender gap?
It's very interesting. The young men in particular have moved away from the Democratic Party in a pretty remarkable way in just the last 4 years. If you go back to 2020, Joe Biden probably won young men by about 23 points, won young women by about 30 points. Right now, Kamala Harris is winning young women by almost 50 points. That is remarkable. But she's only winning young men by 17 points, a massive gender gap. Look, she's still winning young men. But it's clear that whether it's the economy or whether it's Trump's sort of cultural appeal or his media strategy of going on podcasts like Lex Friedman and Theo Vaughn, this demographic has come up watching YouTubers, looking at Snapchat, listening to podcasts. That's where they're getting their information. And Donald Trump has very much leaned into that. I'm currently in North Carolina, obviously a battleground state. Over the weekend when I was watching football on YouTube TV, streaming, I was getting nailed with ads from Trump Super PAC, MAGA Inc., the Trump campaign, just going after Kamala Harris. And I was seeing more Trump ads Then Kamala adds, because I am a target demo for the Trump campaign, theoretically, a man between 18 and 44 watching sports on streaming. So the Trump campaign is going very hard at that. So are their allies. But again, Kamala Harris can make up for whatever deficit she has with young men by her enormous support with young women.
Politics aside, we're glad you're a fan of streaming. We are here too. Peter Hamby, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but the stage is set here at the Broadcast Center in New York City as the two men vying to be the next Vice President of the United States get set to square off on the issues. Stay with CBS News 24/7.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush. What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate, moderated by Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Tonight at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on CBS.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Reiser. Welcome to a special Vice Presidential Debate edition of America Decides. It's 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and we are just 2 hours away from the only planned VP debate of the 2024 election. I'm here in New York alongside my CBS News colleagues who are in the center of it all in the spin room. Political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns and senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. We'll be checking in with them throughout the night and just a little bit. This will be the sole chance Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance get to meet publicly on a debate stage. Tonight's 90-minute face-off will be moderated by CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell and CBS News chief foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan. Both candidates have walked through the set and are expected back at the Broadcast Center in the next hour. When they step up on the debate stage tonight, it will be the first time the two men will meet in person. The candidates are likely to touch on issues like the economy, abortion, immigration, and the crisis in the Middle East, where tensions escalated just hours before the debate. 60 Minutes has announced its primetime election special. Vice President Harris will speak with correspondent Bill Whitaker. After initially accepting 60 Minutes' request for an interview with Scott Pelley, former President Trump's campaign has decided not to participate. Our original invitation to former President Trump to be interviewed by 60 Minutes stands. The special 60 Minutes airs Monday, October 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern. So let's go back to Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe. A lot has changed in the few hours since we started. The room has really filled out.
It has.
It has. Good to be with you, Lindsay.
It is. And you know, Lindsay, you're at one end of this massive complex here in Manhattan on West 57th Street. We're at the other end. Our friends from CBS Sports are down the hall, and the debate itself is literally through that wall in one of the many studios here in this big building. And, you know, normally these things have been held on university campuses or at like the Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Not in the CBS Broadcast Center ever before. Finn Gomez, our political director, is now with us here again. What have you learned in the last few hours as we get ready for this debate?
Well, there's a couple things. I do want to add that CBS was the first one to have a televised presidential debate in 1960. Just a reminder for those history.
At WBBM CBS Chicago.
Of course you would know that.
Trivia.
Absolutely, but yes.
Trivia you can use at your
Absolutely, yes.
And there are pictures on the wall in that newsroom. If you're watching in Chicago at CBS Chicago, you know.
Very famous, very famous. A couple things I've been hearing is, one is that I have heard from sources close to the Trump campaign that we've been hearing some of these. They've been sort of like alerting in a way this past couple of weeks of certain hits, kind of like signaling that they might be doing these hits against that Vance may be going after Walz on certain issues, right? Including immigration, like the whole stolen valor argument that we're hearing back and forth.
Veteran rhetoric.
Right, on his military record. But what I'm told is there's two main focuses. One is that is there's a little bit of red herrings, if you will, maybe a school of red herrings there. But the two areas that he will focus on is one, really introduce himself to the American viewing public. And also because like right out of the gates he had sort of like some sort of a like negative sort of just like rollout, if you will.
Rough start.
Thank you. That's a much better way to put it. And also in our polling, it shows that there's much more enthusiasm for those voting for Harris-Walz for the VP candidate than there are for Vance, right? So one thing is introducing himself to the American public. And two is, instead of really going after Walz, which I'm sure he will, but really go after Vice President Harris and Joe Biden, and just to continue to tie him back to that administration.
It's traditionally what the running mate's supposed to do in a setting like this, right?
But so that will be more of his focus. That's what I've been told.
Both of you track the Trump campaign much closer than I do. What do we make of their decision to say no to 60 Minutes?
Personally, I think it's a lost opportunity, right? I mean, especially since the Trump campaign has been arguing since Kamala Harris assumed the nomination, that she has been skirting interviews, that she hasn't sat down with with Main Street. She sat down with CNN, but she hasn't been doing. Donald Trump prides himself on taking lots of questions from the press in press conferences, that he's constantly talking to the press and taking these questions. This has been a central criticism that he has been waging against Kamala Harris. So now for her to sit down and do that 60 Minutes interview and for him to not anymore, I think that blunts that criticism a bit.
And with 34 days to go until November 5th election, you're looking at this massive audience. 35 days today, 34 days tomorrow when it would air, right?
High tech.
But 35 days.
We have.
It's a lot better than my whiteboard, a lot neater. But yeah, I mean, why would you not want this focus on you from this huge crowd of a lot of, I'm assuming here, but a lot of potential voters, right, that are in that crowd demographic. Why not? It seems like a missed opportunity.
And it's interesting too. Sorry, Ed.
Well, just that his campaign has suggested that there was nothing ever scheduled and that there would be live fact-checking. First of all, it's a taped program. If there were to be live fact-checking, that would be part of a normal standard interview that anyone would do with a political
The same would be
candidate.
applied to Kamala Harris.
No, sir, that's not quite what it is. Right. It's this. So he doesn't want to be challenged, in essence.
What's interesting, too, is that when you talk to the Trump campaign, they believe that the voters that they are targeting in these battleground states are not paying attention to mainstream media audiences. And you'll notice that, as we all have, that he has been doing lots of podcasts and he's been doing, interviews with non-traditional sources.
And so has she.
And so has she, exactly. And so it's targeting those voters in a different kind of way, trying to get to the media that they believe that they're watching.
Yeah. And who has he been targeting primarily? It's been young male voters.
Right.
The campaign really thinks they can bank on that demographic, which is, again, 35 days to go. And maybe that's not like a large swath of the voters or viewers, perhaps, on the special. But to me, it still is a missed opportunity. Yes, he has not done non-traditional. He's been doing non-traditional media. But still, I mean, so many people can view.
What's interesting, too, as we're kind of bringing this back to the vice presidential debate, is that Tim Walz has not really been out there as much talking to the press either. He's been doing rallies and he's been doing kind of retail stops, but this is a moment for him to be in a kind of setting that he hasn't really been in on this stage. Right. I mean, the Vance team argues that Vance has been taking questions from the media at every stop, that he's been going on the Sunday shows, that's kind of been part of his conditioning. No, and Trump hasn't either. But for Walz, it is interesting to see kind of what the challenge is for him here.
Walz does, Trump does take a lot more questions in from, reporters. As you know, you've been at a couple of his press conferences when he does take questions, right? But I think there is a sense from the Harris-Walz sides that they're playing it safe sometimes, right? They make no errors, right? No errors. Playing a little bit of cover defense. Yeah. They feel that they can sit on that.
Well, we're looking forward to 60 Minutes on Monday. First, we're looking forward to this debate, which now happens in just under 2 hours. Finn Gomez, our political director.
That's right.
Chiefly responsible for putting all this together. Good luck to you as the night rolls on. We'll be here in the spin room, Lindsay, just down the hall from the NFL Today and just down the hall from you. Back over to you at the other end of this massive CBS Broadcast Center.
Well, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. We turn now to the Middle East as Iran fired rounds of missiles at Israel today. The White House says roughly 200 ballistic missiles were fired from Iran and that U.S. military vessels in the area helped fend off the strikes. The IDF has already vowed retaliation. U.S. officials say the Biden administration will consult with Israel on next steps.
Obviously, this is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event. And it is equally significant that we were able to step up with Israel and create a situation in which no one was killed in this attack in Israel, so far as we know at this time.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Weijia, how is the U.S. planning to respond to this latest escalation?
Well, Lindsay, it really isn't up to the U.S., although they are consulting very closely with Israel. It's going to be Israel's ultimate decision how to retaliate, if at all, which, of course, we know they already said, of course, they would, and what consequences there will be. Although the White House has been very clear since even before the strike happened that there would be, quote, severe consequences. We know that back in April, when Iran also launched an attack on Israel, there were a hefty number of U.S. sanctions against Iranian leaders, against its missile drone program. And so that could be the case as well. I asked the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, today what those consequences would look like. And he and President Biden both said that that remains to be seen, but reiterated that they would be severe, Lindsay. So this is in coordination with Israel. Of course, this attack just unfolded. So they're going to do a lot of assessments and calculations to determine the next steps.
When Jake Sullivan spoke to the White House press corps, he had said that he was asked whether President Biden would speak with Netanyahu, and he said he had nothing to announce from the podium, but that the president was tracking this minute by minute. Has anything changed in those few hours?
Well, after that, we also had a chance to hear from President Biden, who was asked the same question. And he said they had not spoken since the strike happened, but that he planned to, although he did not give any time frame for that. But it is notable, Lindsay, that Biden said the same thing a few days ago, and that was before the strike, that he wanted to talk to Netanyahu because, of course, Netanyahu did not agree to the ceasefire that the president was pushing for, which is why the strike happened today. Because it was in retaliation for for Israel's strike that killed a Hezbollah leader. And so, these two leaders, they have not spoken since all of these tensions have escalated. But again, the president says he wants to speak to Netanyahu at some point.
Rija Jing, thank you.
Sure.
The economy remains one of the key issues for voters ahead of the election. We'll take a look at economic priorities from both campaigns and how a port strike affecting the East Coast and Gulf Coast could play a major role. You're streaming America Decides.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Tens of thousands of dock workers at ports along the East and Gulf Coast have gone on strike. The union representing those workers has been locked in a labor dispute with the port operators. They're demanding pay raises and protections from automation. Former President Trump addressed the strike in a new statement out tonight, saying, quote, "The situation should never have come to this," adding American workers should be able to negotiate for better wages. He also blames Harris for inflation, which he says caused the strike. CBS News senior business and technology correspondent Jolene Kent joins us now from Los Angeles. Jolene, good to see you. What will the economic impact of this port strike be?
Lindsay, great to be with you. We're talking about 25,000 workers from Boston all the way to Houston who've gone on strike, who've taken to picket these issues and these benefits that they're looking for. Overall, according to JP Morgan Chase, we can expect this to cost the American economy about $5 billion a day. And the real concern going forward is if this is a protracted strike, it could have an impact on supplies from perishable foods, cars, and construction supplies. But the good news here is that some of the essentials out there that New York Governor Hochul has warned about will not be affected. So we're talking about home heating oil, diesel, gas. So there has been an overall warning to consumers out there. You don't need to panic. You don't need to go out and stock up on a lot of the supplies you may be worried about. Both sides obviously hoping to get to some kind of resolution here, but it could be a very, very costly strike as these ports are essential to all of our economic activity, Lindsay.
Jolene, let's shift now and talk about, of course, tonight's events and the economy. Voters consistently name the economy as a top issue. Their policies are very divergent, and economists have actually had skepticism over both of their proposals. What are the key differences between the campaign's economic pitches?
Yeah, we expect to hear from Walz and Vance tonight. Very, very different perspectives that largely support their respective tickets. That is obviously going to be the case as they try to push the Trump and Harris agendas, both of which have, put out these ideas that largely contingent on passing Congress or getting additional approvals. These are very much ideas that are on the table that will be difficult to accomplish regardless of which side you look at. So we do know, if you look at the overall economy right now, the government data is pretty strong when it comes to how the economy has performed, but we do know that grocery prices over the last 4 years have gone up 21% since President Biden took office. Average hourly wages are up, outpacing inflation, which is a good thing. But as Vice President Harris and the candidate Walz have explained, a lot of Americans aren't feeling that. So you can expect to hear from the Harris ticket from Walz that there is more work to be done, whereas Vance is expected to hammer on the inflation issue and continue to support the tariffs, on imported goods that so many economists have told us will actually cost the average American taxpayer more than $1,000 a year if they go through. So we do know that Walz will likely be supporting the $25,000 down payment assistance plan that Vice President Harris has been pushing. We also know tax incentives have also been proposed, so we expect to hear more on that front. Whereas when you look at former President Trump, he has proposed changing regulations and making federal land available for housing and trying to propose solutions that way. You can expect to hear from Vance on that topic. Also, immigration folds into the economy here. President Trump has said he would like to deport 15 to 20 million undocumented workers. He believes that those individuals contribute to the housing shortage. But of course, when it comes to the housing supply situation, a lot of workers in that group certainly would be contributing to possibly more housing supply in the long run. So a lot of complicated issues here, but expect it to be pocketbook and sticking with what their bosses essentially have said already on the campaign trail.
A lot to listen for tonight, Jolene. Kent, thank you.
Thanks.
Several baseless claims were made regarding the legitimacy of the 2020 presidential election. And since then, one man has gone around the nation to promote hand-counting votes, claiming it to be the most efficient way to determine a winner. However, one Texas town that went this route found flaws with the method. Major Garrett gives us a closer look.
For 2 years, Mark Cook has crisscrossed America's political battlegrounds in his RV, preaching a kind of low-tech, election-doubting gospel.
But we're told, trust the machines. They're wonderful. They're perfect. And that is a way to manipulate an election.
Cook and his hand count roadshow are part of an election conspiracy movement that's been growing since 2020.
We used to count our votes ourselves.
One that holds since some voting machines can be hacked and vote manipulation is possible, the only count to be trusted is an old-fashioned hand count.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm back.
On this night, Cook is back in deep red Gillespie County, Texas, where last year
0.1% of Texas still hand counts.
He convinced Republicans here who run their own primaries to join the small minority that hand count. Hundreds of volunteers stayed at this wine bar until 4:30 in the morning to count roughly 8,000 votes, with numerous errors.
We only have 13 precincts, 12 of which turned in final tally sheets that were inaccurate. We sort of began.
Jim Riley oversees elections in Gillespie County.
The hand counting, in my opinion, did nothing to improve elections in the county.
Riley, a Republican, says Gillespie's systems were already top-notch. Paper ballots tallied by a state-approved scanner and then verified for accuracy. As much as you've opened up transparency and created visibility and reassurance, it still, for some, hasn't been enough.
No, and for some it won't ever be enough.
Something didn't smell right.
Mo Saidi was the Republican chair of Gillespie County when the hand count roadshow came to town.
And nobody provided a single iota of evidence. Nobody could say, really, what are we solving? So we were chasing this elusive problem that never existed.
Numerous studies have shown hand counts to be less accurate, more costly, and more time-consuming. But that hasn't stopped Cook from preaching.
And I'm loving spreading these seeds every county I go to.
We tried to ask him some basic questions. First in Michigan, he drove away. And again in Pennsylvania.
Major Garrett, CBS News. Will you have any time to talk to me?
Oh, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking.
No, I know. Beforehand.
No.
Election experts worry about Cook's motive.
The day after the election through January 20th, if you thought 2020 was nasty, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Even in the wake of Gillespie County's hand count failure, the hardened hand count faction is flooding county meetings, demanding change before November and dividing the community. In retrospect, the hand count experience here has been a net what?
I think it's a net loss. If you don't like hand counting, you're evil.
Evil over a solution in search of a problem. Gillespie County's tale should be a warning for hand count advocates everywhere.
Major thanks. We're counting the minutes until the one and only planned vice presidential debate of this cycle. Does the undercard matchup matter? We are going to discuss with our stellar panel next. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we
unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be.
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We've been closely following developments in the Middle East. Iran launched nearly 200 missiles at Israel earlier today in what the White House is calling a significant escalation. So far, the Israeli military has reported no casualties from the attack. Earlier today, we heard from Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Iran, for the second time in the space of 5 months, launched a direct attack on Israel. This is totally unacceptable, and the entire world should condemn it. We have demonstrated once again our commitment to Israel's defense. We'll remain in very close touch with Israel and other partners in the region in the hours and days ahead.
Let's bring in Andrew Boyd. He's the former chief of operations at the CIA's Counterterrorism Mission Center and a CBS News contributor. Thanks for being here. How surprising is it that this missile attack was largely intercepted and there, as of right now, don't appear to be any or many casualties?
I'm not surprised. The Iron Dome, David's Sling, the Arrow missile systems are quite effective, as well as the support that the Jordanians and the U.S. military provided. That is not surprising. I think I would have thought the Iranians would have learned this lesson back on 13 April when they launched 300 ballistic missiles as well as drones, and none of them made it to their targets. It would appear it would be the same, even though it was 180-plus ballistic missiles and no drones.
So does that mean then that this was maybe sort of if they knew that it wouldn't be effective, it is still some kind of response to what they see as, of course, the targeted killings of the head of Hamas and Hezbollah?
I think it was they were trying to replicate what they did in April. The only difference is that I think there's a great deal of resolve in Israel amongst the Israeli populace where they want these external threats to go away. I think there's a lot of discussion. Former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on another network was talking about the potentiality of attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. So I do think there's going to be a lot of pressure within Israel to retaliate, and the Iranians may have miscalculated on this one.
What level of response do you expect from Israel?
The Israelis are in the driver's seat on this. It could be a symbolic retaliation. I suspect it will be more intense than what we saw in April. It may be an attack on a military facility. It may be an attack on an energy facility, a nuclear or oil distribution. But I suspect there will be a significant retaliation. Prime Minister Netanyahu and other politicians in Israel have been signaling as such.
Andrew Boyd, thank you.
It's the most dangerous time we've had, certainly since the end of the Second World War. I think it could end up being a world war. You have two hot spots, and you'll probably have a third, maybe with Taiwan. But you have Ukraine and Russia, and that's out of control. I met with President Zelensky, and I got along very well with President Putin. I think I can get it solved.
That was former President Donald Trump moments ago reacting to the situation unfolding in the Middle East. Let's bring in our panel. Tricia McLaughlin, Joel Payne, and Evan McMorris-Santoro join us now. Tricia is a former senior advisor to Vivek Ramaswamy's presidential campaign. Joel is a CBS News political contributor, and Evan is a politics reporter for the Washington publication Notice. So we're going to talk about this and all things debate tonight. But Tricia, first of all, we know that foreign policy is going to come up, especially because of these developments. How does Vance set himself apart in terms of how he proves to the American people he's ready?
Well, of course, J.D. Vance did serve in the military, as did Tim Walz. I wouldn't be surprised, obviously, if J.D. Vance brings up the issues with Walz's service, potential fabrication. That being aside, on the foreign policy front, what I would advise him to say is that Iran is $100 billion richer than they were when Donald Trump was in office. And why is that? Because Tim Walz's defense is that no sanctions were lifted by the Biden-Harris administration. That technically isn't true. Actually, they just disqualified their proxies. So there was different ways for Iran to get their oil outside of the country and able to fund their terrorist activities, including funding those ballistic missiles that they just shot at Israel earlier today.
Joel, if that comes up, how do you expect Walz to respond?
I think Walz is going to follow what Kamala Harris has been talking about, which is about how Donald Trump shows up on the world stage and how J.D. Vance is a part of a Trump-Vance administration would show up, which is provoking Russia to be more aggressive in the war in Ukraine, and also talking about Donald Trump and provocative actions in the Middle East and how that could inflame the situation. I think there is actually a lot of fodder for both candidates to discuss here. I also think it's just notable that whoever wins this election, it's very likely that the first 100 days of the next administration is going to be consumed by these two hotspots in the world. What's happening, obviously, in Ukraine with Putin's advance in Ukraine, and obviously what's happening in the Middle East. And, this just goes to show that any presidency, your best laid plans can be put to the side by world events.
Let's put foreign policy aside for a second and talk about some of the meat and bones of the debate tonight. Evan, you have reporting on what journalists kind of call expectation setting. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I actually can go off of what we were just talking about as well with this, which is, the thing about a VP debate is that these two guys are going to be on stage. They don't make the policy for the administration. They're going to be the vice president of the administration. Their job on the debate stage is to forward their presidential nominees' policies and to not damage them, right? And so when it comes to the foreign policy stuff, a tough situation is that you have, for example, Harris is coming off of as the vice president of a president who is very attached to foreign policy. And so she has to sort of forge her own path, but that's sort of a challenge for her because of just the overarching power of Biden when it comes to foreign policy. And Trump, we don't know what he thinks about a lot of this stuff, right? He has said, when confronted about these wars and things that are going on, he just says, well, if I was president, it wouldn't be happening. But they are happening, and they need to be answered for. And so the challenge that Vance has is Vance has to tell people that Trump actually has some forward-thinking plans about this stuff and not just looking backwards at his old presidency.
But Tricia,
I think that's part of the expectation setting that we're dealing with.
We'll go back to that. But is that effective for the campaign? And that's why they keep saying it. If this just wouldn't be happening, it's not. You can't prove it.
Well, we can prove his past record, which we know that the last 4 years, the world that Biden-Harris inherited from Donald Trump, it is now a whole lot less safe, whether it be in Venezuela, whether it be in Ukraine, whether it be in the Middle East now. So Donald Trump does have a record of peace, which Biden-Harris, you can laugh at that as much as you want, but that's just simply true. Were we at war under Donald Trump? No, we weren't. And now we are likely to face some major
He faced
wars.
criticism for some of his precarious relationships.
Well, but did that advance U.S. interests? Absolutely. Look, we were facing peace. Now we have 40,000 troops in the Middle East, and we're sending more.
I think that's certainly going to be Donald Trump's argument, and I think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have actually done a good job of using that aggressiveness against Donald Trump by talking about his lack of sobriety on the world stage and the fact that he's not respected and that he's easily played and easily turned around by flattery and things like that. That's what Kamala Harris did well in her DNC speech. I also think looking introspectively at Kamala Harris, it's notable to me that Kamala Harris is going to have to at some point put some distance between herself and the Biden administration on the Middle East. She's getting the benefit of the doubt right now. I don't know how long that the coalition that she's very carefully holding together is going to give her the space to do that. She's done it now. I think she's probably got till very shortly after the election to kind of turn the page from the Biden policy there.
Evan, I do want to bring you in again on your reporting on expectation setting.
Oh, okay. Well, leading up to this, right, we've seen both sides talk about how the other guy is going to be incredible at this, right? We've seen a lot of reporting coming out about Tim Walz telling Kamala Harris when he was selected as vice president, I'm a terrible debater. I just got to warn you, I'm a terrible debater, right? And then meanwhile, Vance has talked about, he hasn't done this very much. He's just a new senator. We don't really know what's going to happen. And the fact of the matter is, both of these guys have spent a long career in public service. They both have been around politics for a very long time, and they've been practicing and training for this moment for days and days and days. But I think we've seen a very interesting kind of expectation setting in this debate, because part of this one is coming off of the last debate where the Trump campaign felt that they were somehow mistreated by the live fact-checking that happened and the way that Harris was able to get under Trump's skin. They felt like this was like sort of unfair. So we've seen in some of their debate prep that they've already started to go after moderators, already started to go after the hosts, this lovely network that's hosting the debate. They're already doing that because they're preparing for that sort of post-debate moment where, you know, if they win, they'll say, hey, we bested this really hard situation that we were in. And if they lose, they'll say, well, it was rigged against us the entire time, right? And so this expectations game has been very different now, I think, given the nature of what happened in that last debate and how impactful it was in terms of the narrative for Trump and Harris.
Let's talk about the spin room. We have about less than a minute left. What is your take on the people that each side has decided to bring into the spin room? I mean, for you, the likes of Katie Britt, we've got Jason Miller, some of the familiar names.
I think those are a lot of people that J.D. Vance surrounded himself with to debate prep, which I think is interesting in and of itself. I'll be interested to see if his wife shows up. That would be, I think, fantastic for him. I hope he reintroduces himself to the American people tonight. That's what I'm really looking for.
Spin room's great. Ed and Caitlin are doing a great job from there. This is all going to be about clips after the debate, stuff that's going to go on TikTok, on YouTube, things that are consumable for the broader public.
Well said. Tricia McLaughlin, Joel Payne, and Evan McMorris-Santoro, thank you all so much. Governor Tim Walz's addition to the Democratic presidential ticket was unexpected just a few months ago. We'll check in with our CBS Minnesota reporter about what Walz intends to do to succeed on the debate stage tonight. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
And welcome back to a special edition of America Decides. Tonight, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will be tested like never before when he takes the debate stage against Ohio Senator J.D. Vance.
Walz gained notoriety by referring to former President Donald Trump and his allies as, quote, weird. But he's also been accused by Republicans of being too liberal on the issues. So let's bring in Caroline Cummings. She's a reporter with CBS News Minnesota and joins us from here in New York City. She's helping us out tonight with coverage. Caroline, as someone who's covered Governor Walz in his home state, what are you looking for tonight as this debate begins?
Well, good evening to you, Ed and Caitlin. It's so great to be with you. So obviously tonight, front and center is Iran's missile strikes on Israel. And I'm curious how he handles that issue and any questions related to it, because he is a governor of Minnesota. He is really well versed in handling crisis in his own state. But when it comes to foreign policy, that is not his strong suit. So I'll be watching for how he handles that, since it's, of course, a really timely issue facing the global stage tonight, and something that will be relevant to him, of course, if he is elected vice president and is in the room for those key negotiations and discussions about foreign policy. I'm also looking to see how he handles scrutiny about his record. Some of these issues have been litigated before, namely his response, the state's response to the 2020 riots in Minneapolis that followed George Floyd's murder. He has been on the record many times answering those questions, but Senator J.D. Vance, who has already attacked him for it on the campaign trail, it's sure to be brought up again. So I'll be curious how he handles that fresh national scrutiny on some of those, issues with his record or parts of his record that have faced scrutiny in the past, guys.
Yeah, Caroline, on that note, I mean, Governor Walz is in his second term as governor. What are some key moments, in addition to what you just described, from his tenure that you also think might come up tonight?
Well, I think he'll use this as a chance to talk about some of his accomplishments, bills he has signed into law that are really popular policies. I'm talking about free breakfast and lunch for all kids in school, regardless of income, or expanding background checks for gun sales and transfers. He will also probably talk about how Minnesota, after the Dobbs decision, codified abortion rights, doubled down, said, Minnesotans have a fundamental right to not only abortion, but also fertility and contraception. And that's a point that he has often talked about on the campaign trail, right? As he tries to contrast himself with Senator J.D. Vance, he talks about his stances on abortion and tries to characterize them as backwards and out of touch with Americans. So I'm sure he'll use that moment to try to talk about what Minnesota did quickly in response to Roe versus Wade being overturned. He also will likely, be asked about, those riots, like I mentioned, but also how he handled the COVID-19 pandemic. That marked mostly the entirety of his first term, or a large part of his first term was marked by how he handled the COVID-19 pandemic. And he also, what's a little bit lost to the national audience, or lost on the national audience, I should say, is that he had to govern in a divided legislature for the entirety of his first term. So he had to work with Republicans across the aisle in order to pass state budgets, to get anything done. So all of these progressive bona fides, these progressive laws that have passed, those have been within the last 2 years since Democrats took back total control of the state capitol. So if he's trying to reach across the aisle, if you will, and appeal to independents or Republicans on the fence, it might be to showcase that, hey, I've worked with Republicans, I know how to govern and get things done in a state, regardless of people's political beliefs, guys.
All right, Caroline Cummings, it looks like quite a scene behind you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
I've seen West 57th so boisterous before.
Thank
you.
Exactly.
A vice presidential debate happening.
And former President Jimmy Carter today is celebrating his 100th birthday. CBS News was invited along for an exclusive look at the 39th President of the United States as he made a rare appearance at a gathering in his backyard surrounded by friends and family in Plains, Georgia.
A military flyover, as you see there, consisting of 4 fighter jets, flew over the party in Carter's honor. The former president's grandson, Jason, recently spoke to 60 Minutes about his grandfather's legacy.
His 4 years in the White House was a remarkable time with significant achievements. That work after the White House, those 40 years where he and my grandmother worked together on the issues that they cared about, really are the fundamental part of their legacy.
Carter is the longest living U.S. president in history and the only former president to become a centenarian. The Democrat and former peanut farmer was elected in 1977 on the heels of Republican fatigue following the Watergate scandal.
Since then, he's devoted his time to humanitarian causes, which won him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Jason Carter recently said his grandfather's goal is to vote for Kamala Harris on Election Day. We wish him a happy, happy birthday. Coming up, the Taylor Swift effect.
That for a segue. We have new voter registration numbers in some key states, and it's giving us some answers on what the impact of the pop star's endorsement of Kamala Harris may be. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Tonight's vice presidential debate is another opportunity for the candidates to boost excitement for their campaigns. We saw a boost in enthusiasm following the presidential debate, but CBS News also found the majority of people see their vote in 2024 mattering more than it did in 2020. One way we can measure voter enthusiasm is by looking at changes in voter registration. So to talk about that, Tom Bonnier joins me now. He's a senior advisor at Target Smart, which analyzes voter registration data. Thanks for being here. You've shared with us new data on voter registration. In those 2 days following Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala Harris, Pennsylvania, Democratic voter registration was 88% higher than it was for the same period in 2020. Who are these newly registered voters, and how does this compare to Republicans?
Yeah, this is an interesting stat, as you said. We're getting the first look at this now, this period. Keeping in mind, this was the debate, then the Taylor Swift endorsement, really all at the same time, or a 1-2 punch. What we're seeing, it's not just Democrats, as you said, it's younger voters. So over 60% of the new registrants in that time period were under the age of 30. We compared to the baseline 4 years earlier, the exact same time period, where young voters were only 45% of the new registrants. On top of that, young women, especially young women of color, young Latino women almost tripling their voter registration rate, and young black women more than doubling their registration rate in Pennsylvania in just that time period right after the debate and the Taylor Swift announcement.
Fascinating. Youth voter registrations in Texas and Florida in particular also increased by 45% in the days following the debate and the Swift endorsement. It's similarly weighted toward Democrats. Earlier, we had Senator Warren on the show. She said she believes Democrats can flip Senate seats in those states. Is there any merit to that?
Well, this data says yes. There's a reason that Democrats are now bullish on these two states, and they're looking to expand the map, and they're actually spending money there. When we looked at the voter registration data in Texas, similar to what we saw in Pennsylvania, in some cases actually bigger, the Democratic share of new registrants increased by 99% in that 2 or 3 day period, whereas the Republican share was actually 9% lower. Again, seeing big increases among Latino voters in both of those states, young black women. So similarly, you're seeing that just huge increase in intensity and enthusiasm following the debate.
You have new data out of Montana, not a state we typically talk about, not a battleground state. What's happening there, and why does it matter?
Well, in Montana, it's the state that's most likely at this point, based on the numbers, to decide who controls the Senate after the election. And we don't have a lot of polling data there, unfortunately. And so the voter registration data is perhaps our best window into how things are looking. What we saw is in the 2-month period, again, after Vice President Harris became the nominee, and we've seen this intensity and enthusiasm among Democrats, we saw this big increase in registrations among Native American voters. In Montana, they have the potential to be a deciding factor in that election. In a state, they'll probably only have about 500,000 people vote.
Tom Bonnier, thanks so much for joining us. We are a little more than an hour out from the first and only planned vice presidential debate right here on CBS News. We'll have special coverage continuing at 8 p.m., but let's go back to the spin room for some final thoughts from Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe. I thought I saw you guys out of the corner of my eye taking a selfie.
We might have done that.
We may have done that.
Guilty.
Not our first rodeo,
No.
but we've been having a lot of fun here as this room is starting to become really crowded. We've had senators come through.
Yep.
We've seen several different lawmakers. Top Trump advisor is right behind us, talking to the press ahead of tonight. The countdown to the debate is just an hour. The countdown to Election Day is
35 days. 35 days as of tonight to go until Election Day. Of course, early voting is underway
in 20
about
states.
20 states, right? So there could be somebody sitting at home tonight going, you know what, I got to wait and see what the running mate's like. I'll cast my ballot tomorrow after I watch tonight, which is a big reason why this should be done tonight. For those of you who've joined us later in the evening, we are at the CBS Broadcast Center here in New York, one of the largest studio spaces in the Big Apple, studios that are normally used by talk shows, game shows in the past. CBS Sports is down the hall. One of the studios right through that wall is where the debate will be happening in a little more than an hour. Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, of course, moderating the debate between Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz. And then we'll be here in this room afterward to hear from both sides as to how they think it went. And we'll probably get a little bit of that. What he meant to say was ... as we often do in spin rooms. And then we'll go from there. And this is essentially the last big tentpole moment of this election.
Right.
Unless for some reason tomorrow, Trump and Harris say, let's do it again.
I mean, this could be the last word, and this could be really the last chance these campaigns have to change the trajectory of the race. I mean, we've been talking about how the past 2 months, so much has happened, but I'm reminded that today is October. what October surprise could come.
Yeah.
We've already had so many summer surprises.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get one tonight.
I'm pulling the notes because consider this. Vance has only been the vice presidential candidate now for 78 days as of tonight. Walz only 56 days. So neither of these guys terribly well known by the broader American public, even though they're a name and a face now that maybe are known to a lot of Americans. Tonight's their chance to really get a good sense of who they are, what they do, what they've done, and how they are under pressure.
And they were picked in part to kind of appeal to similar voters.
Right.
White working class voters in the Midwestern states, that blue wall that we talk about all the time. Does tonight move the needle among any in that group? We'll see. But it's fascinating. Couldn't be more different, but in terms of that sliver that they're trying to attract, we'll see.
Lindsay, 4 hours with you, we'd do it anytime.
Show your art again. Are you available for my kid's next birthday for her birthday banners?
The graphics department's okay with this. They'd rather use theirs, but this is the low tech. Started during the pandemic, but it keeps going. 35 to go.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, Ed O'Keefe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. That does it for me, but the night's just getting started here at CBS News. The media gathered outside the broadcast center in the heart of New York City, inside the spin room full of surrogates for the vice presidential candidates ready to go to bat for their picks. Down the hall, the stage is set for Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance's first meeting and the only planned VP debate this election cycle. My colleagues John Dickerson and Cecilia Vega are standing in New York's Times Square. They will take over coverage after the break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News.